Hello, subscribers. We have a very special guest today with us. This is Chris Alaimo from Classic Gaming Quarterly. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I have been following Chris for quite some time. He is, I have to be honest, he is my favorite YouTuber of all time. He has some amazing segments, which we'll talk about later. But every time he releases a new video, I feel like a kid on Christmas morning, just super excited. I'm like, all right, I get to go see a Chris video. So I'm calling it a Chris video. I know it's Classic Gaming Quarterly,
Chris video is fun.
but you are Classic Gaming Quarterly.
Well, true, yes. Well, thank you. I didn't know I was your favorite YouTuber, so thank you.
Yes.
Saying
Oh,
that.
thank you for all that you've put out for the gaming community. It's amazing. Okay. So we'll just jump right into the interview. The first question is, and some people don't want to answer this, but
Okay.
so far everybody has, but
Okay.
what year were you born?
Oh, 1977.
Good year.
Yeah. That's also the year the Atari 2600 came out.
Nice.
That's how I remember. And Star Wars.
That's how you remember your birth date is because of
Yeah, like, hey, what year were you born? I'm like, wait, what year did the Atari VCS come out? Oh, yeah, it was 77.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it was a great year. I think I interviewed someone else that was from 77. Of course, that's my birth year too. So,
Oh,
right.
I was going to ask, but I didn't know if the interviewee was allowed to ask questions.
Yeah, of course you
I
are.
was curious.
Especially you. You're allowed to ask anything you want, Chris. You get that privilege. Okay, where do you live?
I live in the Sacramento area in Northern California. So Sacramento is the state capital, but people think of California, they think of like probably San Francisco and Los Angeles. So people don't necessarily know where Sacramento is, and it's at about the same latitude roughly as San Francisco, maybe a little bit north. It's just inland about like an hour's drive.
Cool. Nice. Have you always lived there?
I've always lived, so like Sacramento is part of a big valley. Like the whole center of California is this gigantic valley. And I've always lived in the valley, just in a few different places.
What is your primary profession?
So I'm an analytical chemist
Oh, wow.
at,
Nice.
at a university. Like I work in a research lab at a university.
Cool. So do you do most of your work in the lab or do you actually go out on sites?
I used to, like when I was, when I first got started, I was younger and I guess less experienced, then I would go out. I'd be the person that would go out in the field. So it's environmental analytical chemistry is what I do. So it's like looking for like organic pollutants or some inorganic pollutants in, whether it's in the atmosphere or in surface water or highway runoff or soil. I've done studies on like composting facilities, like researching the chemicals that are off-gassed when composting gets done.
Oh,
And so when I was younger, I used to have to go out and do a lot of that stuff, including going out to composting facilities, which is a little bit ripe. But now we got younger people to do that. And, I'm turning into a semi-old man now, so they keep me in the lab.
cool. Do they keep you locked in a closet too and just push food under the door?
I think if my boss had his choice, that's what he would do. Just keep me safe, keep me stored in the closet.
Nice. Cool. What kinds of jobs have you had in the past?
Wow. So I didn't graduate college until I was a little bit older. Like when I graduated high school, like I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. I was a very bad student in high school, and so I went to like I didn't grow up this way, but I'm saying like just because of where I lived, I went to the high school that all the affluent kids in the city where I grew up went, and so there were just tons and tons of kids in my school that were going to go off to like one of the UC campuses or even go back east and go to like an Ivy League school. And that like, I knew that wasn't happening for me because I got bad grades, but we also didn't have the money for me to really go to college. So like I took a whole semester off and just had a job. And then I went to school part-time for like 5 years, like just community college, before I finally moved away to go to university. So, like my first job immediately at high school, like I graduated high school, and then like literally a few days later, I had that was actually my first real job, working as like a sales associate at Radio Shack, which I got talked about that on my show. I've got, Radio Shack was one of my favorite stores growing up, so I have great memories of shopping there. And so for me to get to work there was pretty cool. I mean, retail is not the most enjoyable working experience you could possibly have, but I still, I only had to do it for like 6 months or something before I got fired. But, well, I didn't really get fired, but kind of. I got fired for quitting. But anyway, so I did that for a while, and then after that, I got a job working at the local zoo. What was the? Oh yeah, so the first job I had at the zoo was working in the gift shop. So that wasn't as fun. And I did that for like a summer. And then that job ended. And then I got another job at the zoo being like a zookeeper's assistant. And that was actually pretty fun.
Wow.
Because I worked for the zookeepers that took care of all the exotic birds. So, they would just basically, like, they had too much work, so they couldn't take care of everything. So they would have me go take care of, like, okay, I had to take care of the flamingos every day. Like,
Wow.
that was one of my jobs, was dealing with the flamingos.
Wow.
And so, I mean, that was a lot of fun, because there were some animals that we couldn't have out on display because they were like too friendly or whatever. And so then you got to kind of chum around with them. Or we had like a lot of like walk-through aviaries, where like the public would go through like a set of double doors and then be in a gigantic area enclosure, and the birds would just be in there with them. And I mean, I don't know if I have some kind of like, is that Mr. Magoo or Dr. Doolittle that could talk to the animals? I forgot which, but
yeah, I don't know.
I don't know if I have that kind of personality or something, but like I used to get in trouble because like these birds would just like take a liking to me, and they would like come hang out with me while I was like I was in there just cleaning and feeding them and stuff. And they would be like following me around and like sitting on my wheelbarrow, and I would get in trouble. Like, you can't be, making friends with the animals. And like, I'm not doing anything. They just like me or whatever.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. Then after that, I had a job for actually a couple of years at the zoo, taking care of the camels. So, and we used to give people rides on the camel. Like, I would come in the morning, I would feed them, take care of them, and then like I'd walk the camels. It wasn't just me; other people worked there too. But we would walk the camels over to this other little area where like the public could pay to take rides on them and stuff. And so we would walk the camels around all day and then put them back. That was pretty fun. But at the same time I was doing that, I was going to community college, and I also had a job on the campus at the community college, working. We had like a tutoring center that was like free to any students. Like, they could walk into this tutoring center and say, I'm struggling in like algebra or something, I need some help. And they would make you an appointment with somebody like myself, and I would tutor people. And like, you could tutor people in anything that you wanted. Like, if you'd taken a class and done well in it, you could say, hey, I want to tutor. Because the more things you could tutor, the more appointments you could take on, right? And so then the more hours you could work. So for a while, I worked like Monday through Friday, I went to school and took classes and worked in the tutoring center. And then Saturday and Sunday, I worked at the zoo. So I, like, for a pretty long stretch of time, I worked 7 days a week.
Wow.
Doing that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And then after, finally I ended up going to a 4-year school. And so I had to move away from where I grew up. And like, I had a little job on campus, working in the chemistry department. But pretty much since then, I mean, I've only really had like 2 jobs since I graduated from college. I worked for a while, for a few years on the campus where I got my degree, working in a lab, being like an analytical chemist. And then I left to go into private industry. And I've kind of mentioned this on my show before, that for a while I had this job where I was like traveling around a lot. And it's because I had this job. So like at my job that I still have now, like, I use like analytical instruments to, analyze samples. So for a while I had a job repairing those instruments instead of using them. So like, I worked for the company that made them. And so I would have to travel around, like, labs would call and say, hey, this thing's acting weird or whatever. And so then I would have to either drive to their lab, or if it was out of state, I would fly to their lab and fix their instruments for them, which was pretty cool because it also gave me the opportunity to, I could hit a lot of game stores in like other states and whatnot. And, I expanded my video game collection quite a bit during that time.
Nice.
I did that for like 4 years, and then I ended up coming back to what was my old job, which I still have now, working for the same guy on the university campus where I work.
Nice.
Sorry, that was a really long answer, but
no, that's great.
My total employment history.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, these interviews are a little bit tricky because some of the people watching this will know nothing about you, and then other people are going to know a lot, and so they're going to want some new things that no one knows about you. So,
yeah,
unfortunately, some people will be like, "Well, I already know that. It's either on his website or he's talked about it or whatever."
Sure.
Well, it'll be a mix.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, what kind of hobbies do you have outside of gaming?
Well, I cook a lot, which, to me, it's a hobby. Like, I cook most of the meals that we eat, and cooking is weird because to some people, cooking is like a chore. Like, cooking is no different than like vacuuming or dusting or mowing your lawn, but I really enjoy doing it. So for me, I consider it to be somewhat of a hobby. I also, when the weather is warm, and I realize that I live in California, so the weather is really never that cold, but like in the spring, summer, and fall, I enjoy cycling. Like I have a road bike, and I go out road cycling. And then I don't practice this hobby as much, I guess, anymore. But ever since I was a teenager, I've been into photography, which, that's why, like, when I started my YouTube channel, I already had a decent camera because I had that camera for taking pictures with. But I still like going out sometimes, and taking pictures and whatnot. Although I guess in some ways having my channel scratches the I just want to use a camera itch.
Gotcha. Awesome. So I know you have 2 channels. You have just the regular CGQ or Classic Gaming Quarterly, and then you have the CGQ Plus. So tell us, the viewers, about both of those channels.
Okay, well, so is it okay if I give a little bit of backstory first?
Absolutely.
Okay, so just if you go all the way back to, I should have looked it up first. I don't remember what year, but I want to say it was probably like 2009, something like that. I started this website, and I ended up calling it Classic Gaming Quarterly. It actually started off, originally I wanted to make a fanzine. I don't know if you know. Yeah, okay, you're not. You know what a fanzine is. I feel like fanzines used to be more popular, like kind of before the internet. There's not too many fanzines around anymore. Although, coincidentally, there's this guy I follow on social media who his whole thing on his blog is about like pencils and stationery. And because I wouldn't call this a hobby, so I didn't say it in the hobby segment. But like I'm really into like writing instruments and paper and stuff, like not like expensive stuff, but I just like getting like nice pencils and whatnot. So because I write a lot, for my show, and so I use a lot of pencils. And he just started his own fanzine, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Like fanzines are still kind of alive and well. So I was going to do a fanzine, and I ended up not doing that. So the fanzine was going to be called Classic Gaming Quarterly because I was like, well, I could probably release one about every 3 months, if I work at it. And, it's supposed to be kind of like a play on Gentleman's Quarterly, like, oh, Classic Gaming Quarterly. And the other thing, though, is that back then I feel like the term retro gaming wasn't really a thing yet. People would say classic gaming. Like, oh, what are you into? Oh, I play like a lot of classic games. And like now everybody says retro gaming, which is, fine, but it's just, maybe now my show should be called Retro Gaming Quarterly or something. Of course, the quarterly part doesn't make sense anymore anyways. But so I started the website, and all I was really doing was like reviewing games. And the reason I started doing that is there's this other website that I still read. The guy is still around, called the Video Game Critic. It's like videogamecritic.com or whatever. And I really liked his style. Like he writes, it's kind of funny. His reviews have gotten a little bit too verbose for me now, but he would write these really short reviews of games, like one paragraph. And like, here's a description, here's what is good or bad about it, and here's a score. And I like that because it didn't spoil the game for you at all. It was just like, here's some basic info, and you can use that to decide whether or not you want to check the game out. And like, especially after, I think it was in like 2010 that the first EverDrive came out. So all of a sudden you could buy this device and you had access to an entire library of games, for the Genesis, because that was the first EverDrive. It's like, well, how many Genesis? There's about 700 Genesis games, I think, like 704 or something like that. So it's like, well, how do you decide what you want to play? And so, like, if I was having a slow day at work or something, like, I would read this guy's website. I would read like all the Genesis reviews, and I had like scratch paper, and I was like making lists of like, okay, these are the games I want to check out, and then I could just leave that list on the table next to my TV or something, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna play some Genesis. I could pull the list out and say, okay, I'm gonna check out, Elemental Master or something like that. But I liked his site so much that I basically kind of copied his format. Like, I did the same thing, where I was making little like one paragraph reviews, and I had one screenshot, and I think I just used a different scoring system than he did, but it was really just a rip off of the video game. And I would write some longer form stuff as well, but again, this is before EverDrive. There was only one EverDrive, so like I was going to video game stores and just buying up any game I could. Like, because I'm going to review this, and I had just boxes of games, like boxes of cartridges, like around, my game room and stuff, which got kind of ridiculous because it was more games than I was ever going to get around to reviewing. But then I got more into like consumption of, YouTube videos and podcasts, and I kind of felt like, that would kind of be fun to try. And this was at the time when I was working at that job I told you about, where I was going out and fixing stuff. I had like a lot of downtime at that job because like the stuff I was fixing was like, it was very important that the stuff was always working because it was being used for medical testing. So like if something broke, I had to go fix it like right this second. Like jump on a plane or get in your car and you have to go like today, right now.
Wow.
And so for that reason, like they didn't keep me like burdened with a big workload. Because if I was super busy, then somebody would call and say, "Oh, this is broken." I'd be like, "Well, I can't be out there until like next Tuesday because I'm busy." Like you can't have that. And so, I purposefully had a light workload so that I could have a fast response time. And I just worked from home. Like there was not an office I went and sat in. And so I would sit at home. Like there were many, many days where I didn't work at all. But I was paid a salary, so it was like, I don't, it's fine with me. But, well, that's the thing is that, yeah, it's nice, but at the same time, like it got kind of boring because never in my life had I had a situation where I didn't get up and go to work. So like all of a sudden I get up and I don't go anywhere. I just wait for the phone to ring. And, you can only spend so much time like looking at Reddit or
right.
I could have gotten more into playing video games, I guess, like tackling some of the RPGs I have. But I just wanted to do something productive. So I just felt like, well, I was watching a lot of Classic Game Room at that time because this was kind of in his like heyday. Like he's still around. I mean, this was, in the earlier days of YouTube, I would say he was probably the biggest gaming YouTuber, or at least one of them. And so I thought, like, well, what if I just did like what he does? Like, what if I'll just make videos that are like single game reviews? Like, okay, today we're going to take a look at NFL Game Day or something on the PlayStation, and then I'll just embed those videos on my website because I was still thinking of it in terms of like this was a new way to make content for my website. Like I didn't think I was going to find an audience on YouTube. It was just like, this way. Like what if you clicked on a link on my website to read a review, and then on top of the text review there was a video you could watch. That would and so that's how I got started making YouTube videos. And to me, the channel was just like a little extension of the website. So if you go watch my early videos, I called it Classic Gaming Quarterly TV because it was just like the video version of Classic Gaming Quarterly. And now, of course, like people don't read. I mean, do people even really read websites that much anymore? I'm not sure if they do. I don't think. I certainly don't get much traffic on my website. So it's more like now that's the website of the YouTube channel and not the YouTube channel of the website.
So you have another channel, CGQ Plus. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Well, so the way that all kind of came about is, again, if you go look at the Classic Gaming Quarterly channel, at the beginning I was just kind of making whatever videos I wanted, because like people are so quick to want to have a huge audience, right? Whether it's like YouTube or a podcast, it's just like, I've known people that have quit because like, well, nobody's watching my show, I quit. And certainly for me, when I was starting out, I remember anytime I uploaded a video, like once it finally got 100 views, I was like happy, like, oh man, 100 people watched my video that I uploaded like 2 months ago or whatever. But when nobody watches your show or nobody listens to your podcast, you're so worried about building an audience, but you don't realize how much freedom you have. Like, my first YouTube video is the first video I ever made. Like I never, it's not like I was making, like somebody will take up like painting, right? And they'll just be at home, painting or whatever. And then maybe at some point they're like, you know what, I think I'm starting to get good at this. Like I might see if I can like put some of my paintings on display at like a local gallery or whatever, right? But so if you see somebody's paintings up at a gallery, you don't see the hundreds or maybe even thousands of paintings they did that were bad, that got them to the point where they felt like, oh, okay, I'm going to have my paintings on public display. Like YouTube by its nature is a public display. And so, and I've never deleted any of mine. I think I have one video that I delisted because I made an updated version of it, but it's still there. But so you can go back and you can see like how terrible my show was when I started, because like I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know how to edit video. I didn't know how to like be on camera. I didn't know how to speak into a microphone. Like I didn't know any of that stuff. Right. But the nice thing was that I had the freedom to suck because like there was no pressure.
Yeah.
Right? But once you build up an audience, and part of it, like, people tell me I overthink things, and I think that there's a lot of truth to that. But so part of it for me is like, I feel like now the main channel has like its thing going on. And like there are videos that I uploaded years ago where I would never upload something like that now, because it's not why people are subscribing to the show. And, you can potentially cost yourself subscribers by, doing that. Although, I mean, these days with YouTube, I don't really know how important subscriber count actually is. Just because, like, you can look at how many subscribers I have, but then, look at how many views a magazine read-through gets, which is way less than my subscribers. And then look at how many views, like, a launch video gets, which is way more than my subscribers. So, like, maybe it doesn't matter, but, part of it is, like, YouTube is so mysterious with, like, how their algorithm works. I mean, people have YouTube channels dedicated to trying to educate people about the algorithm, except nobody really knows how it works. And so when you have a bigger channel, you're constantly like thinking, okay, well, if I upload this video, what's that going to do to the algorithm? Like, yeah, maybe YouTube's not going to recommend that video, but then what happens the next time I upload a big video? Like, is it not going to recommend that one either? Like, so, so I decided I wanted to start making sort of some casual content, but I felt like, because for me, I already sometimes feel bad about magazine read-throughs on the main channel because, like, they're not lower quality in my opinion, but they're very different, right, than like a scripted video. And for a while, I was thinking, like, I'm just going to make a separate channel for magazine read-throughs, and I ended up not doing that. But that's where my head was at. And so when I started wanting to make the kind of videos that I make on CGQ Plus, I felt like, well, I need to make a second channel for that. And a lot of people don't understand that. They think, like, why would you make a second channel? That doesn't make any sense. But for the reasons I just explained, it's like that's why you can really kill your channel, I think, if you make the wrong decisions. And especially with my main channel, I don't upload that often to the main channel. So if all the stuff that was getting uploaded to CGQ Plus was getting uploaded to the main channel, that would be what was dominating the main channel. And so at that point, well, here's this random launch video, I don't think those videos would do as well anymore.
Yeah. No, so I totally get what you're saying there. That makes complete sense.
I mean, and then it gets even worse because then there have been, then even with the second channel, the problem is that a YouTube channel can establish some kind of identity. Like, this is what this channel is like about. And then when you start uploading content that deviates from that, you'll get a lot of your viewers who are not happy with that. Like, well, when are you making this, or how come you haven't done another one of those videos? And so, like with my main channel, it's just like I can upload a magazine read through, and it's like, well, when's the NES launch video coming out, or when are you going to do the launch of the PS2? And now, even with the side channel, it's like I can make what I think is a pretty cool video about, like my arcade cabinet or something. And then you hear like, or you read, well, when's the next flashback episode coming out? And so it's like, then part of it is like, well, I can't have a separate channel for like every single thing.
Right.
Because like the problem I had on the side channel was with all of the streaming that I was doing. Because the stream archives, they pop up in people's subscription feeds, and YouTube doesn't give you a way to not have that happen. Like, okay, I'm going to live stream, and then I want the archive to be there, but like I don't want it to send somebody a notification or something. Like,
right.
As a viewer, you can't like subscribe to like particular playlists or say I only want notifications from like a particular playlist on a channel. And so then it's like, well, the last 5 things that have been on my channel were live streamed, so maybe I shouldn't live stream. I should do something else. And so then you get to the point where I feel almost like I have the same level of lack of freedom with the side channel. But as far as that goes, I really try to stop myself and say, no, the point of this channel is I'm going to do whatever I want. And if I upload a video where I'm just opening mail or talking about some stuff I just bought, if people don't like that, then they're just going to have to, turn off notifications or unsubscribe, because like that channel is supposed to be like where I can just kind of do whatever I feel like doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. That makes total sense. You do all kinds of different videos. I'm going to mention some of the types here you do, just for the viewers that aren't familiar with you. You do what you call flashback videos. That's my personal favorite. You do reviews of games. You do launch videos of games. You have question and answers. You have let's reads where you read through magazines. You have let's plays. You have live streams, and you have even more. You have like you used to have it where people would send you things and you would open them, and basically kind of like unboxing type situation. So you have so many different types of things you do across the 2 channels. For the viewers that aren't familiar, I cannot recommend enough to go check out both of those channels. They're just amazing. And the community surrounding your channels is fantastic too. You have so many passionate.
I very much agree with that. Just the group of people that have kind of come together around my channel are really awesome. And like, a lot of them hang out in the Discord, but not everybody does Discord. It's like people that regularly interact with me on Twitter, or just, all the familiar names and faces that I see in the comment section of the videos. Nice.
So out of all those different types of videos that you do you have a category that's your favorite?
I mean, not really. There's certain things that I guess I like doing better than others. I mean, obviously like the launch caliber videos are the things that I'm like the most proud of. Just because, at some point, someday I won't be making YouTube videos anymore. Maybe that won't be for a very long time. But, I feel like those videos are always going to be out there and are always going to be getting, watched by people. And so that was, I guess I kind of feel like maybe I made my mark or whatever in the gaming community by making those videos. So I get a lot of pride out of those. Like things like the flashback videos, like I love making them, but I always feel a little bit uncomfortable with them because sometimes I feel like they're too personal, or I'm putting too much information out there. Just because, not everybody that watches my show is sort of an honest actor or is really there because they enjoy the content. And so I can't help but think like, well, who's watching this that I would prefer to not have watching this? So I think that's part of the reason that, maybe those videos have slowed down a little bit lately, is I really have to be in the right kind of mindset to make those videos. It's funny. So, I'm not going to say the person's name, but just the other day I was talking to another prominent YouTuber, probably more prominent than myself, and we were kind of commiserating on the fact that neither one of us thought that our channels were ever going to go anywhere when we started them, and that to a certain extent, both of us are uncomfortable with the attention that we personally receive, and that if both of us had it to do all over again, we would have like used fake names or something. I wish I'd made up like a different last name. And like I have other friends who do like YouTube or podcasts where they use fake last names or just fake names to give them a little bit of a some to protect their privacy a little bit. But or I mean, there's like some famous YouTubers who just don't really use a name, and it's like I don't know, like that person's pretty famous, but I don't really actually know what their name is.
Yeah.
Because like they just go by whatever they branded their channel. So yeah, but yeah, so I don't know. As far as to get back to the original question, like what my favorite is, I kind of don't really have one. I guess like I just anything if I didn't enjoy making any of them, I guess I wouldn't be making them. But.
That's good. So, do you having all those varieties of different types of videos? Does that help prevent burnout for you, so you don't get burned out?
Yeah, definitely. Because like when I make those launch videos, or things of like when I say launch videos, I include like the Sega Genesis in 1990. It's like those long form. Probably call them launch videos is not the best descriptor, but like the long form scripted content. I mean, really, that's the only scripted content that I make. And I think a lot of people don't understand how long it takes to make stuff like that. You look at like my channel or someone like the Gaming Historian, and you see how often videos come out, and it's not very often. And it's just because of how long it takes to make those. And so, like, generally, once I'm finished with one of those videos, I haven't made a launch video now in a long time. It hasn't been since the Dreamcast one last year. Although I'm currently working on something of the same. It's not a launch video, but it's another scripted video. Usually by the time I'm done with those, like I don't even want to make another one for a while because you get a little bit burned out. And so to be able to say, okay, like I got that done. Now I'm going to go do a magazine read through, or I'm going to go mess around on the other channel for a while. Definitely helps.
How many hours a week do you think you spend dedicated to one or the other of your channels?
I mean, it's really hard to say. I mean, I feel like I spend at least some time working on my show every single day. But I have a full-time job, so I come home and I have to cook and just be a husband and whatnot. And so like on a weeknight, I only might have an hour or two. Like I don't watch like TV. Not because I love TV. I'm not judging, but I'm saying like we're a normal person might come home, have dinner with their family, and then like let's sit down and watch TV together. Like I come home, have dinner with my wife. How was your day? How was your day? And then at some point I go, okay, I'll see you later. And I go down to the basement or I go up to my upstairs office and work on the show for a couple of few hours. And like what I'm doing just depends on what kind of video I'm working on. But then on the weekends, I try to spend more time, but it's the same thing. It's like you have to find like a work-life balance because again, like I'm married and we have a house and, I can't, if I was left to my own devices, honestly, like I would come home and eat some ramen noodles or a bowl of cereal. And then I would work on my show until I was so tired I went to bed. And then the same thing probably on the weekends. I would work all day, every day on the weekends. And I would be happy to do it. I'm saying it's not, to me, it's not really work. Like I love making my show. But, I have other things that I have to do, but I think that's a good thing because I think if I did nothing but work on my show constantly, I don't think that's maybe the healthiest thing to do. But it really depends on what I'm working on. Like there have been times like normally I don't have like deadlines on my show, right? Like something's going to come out like whenever it comes out. But if you remember a couple of years ago, I released the launch of the Sega Master System. And then not long after that, I redid the launch of the Sega Genesis episode. Like I made an entire new one basically. And that came out right after. And I don't remember when exactly they came out, but my recollection was that they both came out like before Christmas that year. And the reason for that was that we were going to go on like a 3-week vacation before Christmas. And I wanted them both done before I left. But once I had decided that I was going to make the launch of the Master System, the launch of the Genesis is the first launch video I ever did. And so I had learned so much about just, crafting YouTube videos that launch of the Genesis video really didn't look that good anymore. It didn't compare favorably to the other videos on my channel. And I always thought, like, well, if somebody were to sit down and watch the launch of the Master System and go, wow, this is pretty, at least in my opinion, pretty good video. And then all of a sudden they watch the launch of the Genesis and be like, whoa, like, what happened? And then they could keep going because I had already done the Saturn. And then the Saturn was also a pretty good one. And so I felt like, oh man, I can't release this video and not have already fixed that video. So maybe I have it backwards. I think I might have actually released the redone Genesis video first and then released the Master System one. But I was trying to get all of that done before we left. And so then, like, I would come home from work and, you know, make dinner, all that kind of stuff. And then I would work until like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, like every night. And then on the weekends, I would literally get up and go sit at my editing computer at like 8 or 9 in the morning and then work again until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. I mean, obviously I would stop and eat or like go hang out with my wife for just a little bit. But I mean, I was probably working more than 40 hours a week easily on the show while still working 40 hours a week at my job.
Wow. That's
so
great.
I try not to do that anymore.
Good. So all that being said, if you could work full time on your show and not have to have a day job, would you want to do that?
No. There's been times in my life where I felt like I wish I could do that. But for a variety of reasons, the answer is no. First of all, you know, I mean, I don't like to get into this kind of stuff too much, but I would just say that I think that in general, YouTube content creators are vastly underpaid. And people don't like to hear, you know, content creators talking about money just because YouTube as a platform started out as just a community-based thing. But over time, you know, channels have come along that, you know, you get people that know a lot about video editing, they can make more polished content, you know, and then at some point YouTube allowed creators to start monetizing their channels, and it changed the face of YouTube. And, you know, it allowed people to start making money, making YouTube videos. But, which I think is awesome personally. I think anytime you can have a situation that allows people to, you know, start their own business or to go to work for themselves doing something that they love rather than working a job that they hate. You know, how is that? That to me is the definition of the American dream. So for people to be able to do that is awesome. But unfortunately, just because of the way YouTube is, unless you're like a huge content creator, like millions of subscribers, you're going to have a hard time making enough money to live. And that's where you have things like Patreon or sponsorships. And that stuff is all great. But for me personally, I would never want to have to rely on something like that to make my living. So, you know, because like I have Patreon, but when do you ever really see me mention it? You know, it's like, it's there. There's a link in the description. If you want to throw me $1 a month to help out the show, great. But, you know, I'm not using that to put food on my table. And so I'm not going to, you know, put it in people's faces. And like, you know, I've done sponsorships in the past. I don't really want to do that anymore either. But the problem is that when you're doing your show and you're trying to make a living, you almost have to do that. You have to kind of almost annoy people with like, you know, like, hey, sign up for my Patreon, or like, hey, have you guys heard of the Ridge Wallet or Dollar Shave Club? And it's just like, you know, I did that and it was great. It helped out my show. I don't want to do it anymore. And none of that stuff would really be necessary if YouTube ad revenue was better. And what's really sad is that if you look at how many ads are on YouTube now, you know, pre-roll ads, non-skippable pre-roll ads, and like now, if you let YouTube put mid-roll ads in your video for you, like it puts one in there like every 5 minutes, and it's really obnoxious. Like somebody the other day left a comment on one of my videos, and they were like, you know, dude, you have way too many mid-roll ads. And, you know, and you know, you get a lot of comments that are just people that are just kind of being jerks. But this person, they weren't really being a jerk. They were just like, you know, I tried to watch this video, but it's like too many mid-roll ads, and I was like, really? And I went and looked, and it was like an older magazine read-through or something, and it was a lot. And I was like, you know, how did that happen? And so I just took them all out, like no mid-roll ads. Especially in a magazine read-through, there's not, you know, you can put like a natural ad break into a scripted video. But a magazine read-through is a little bit harder to do that. But my point in bringing that up is just like there are way more ads now in YouTube videos, but the people making those YouTube videos are making way less money than they were, you know. And that, I mean, that's what, to go back to Classic Game Room, that's what happened to Classic Game Room, is that guy was making good money on YouTube, and then the ad revenue just kept going down and going down and going down. And so for me, I would not want to have to rely on that. You know, I like the situation that I'm in. Like, you know, my channel makes some decent money, and basically all that really means is that anything I ever need for my show, I can just buy it. I don't have to think about it. Within reason, right?
Right.
I mean, I need a new camera. I need a new microphone. I needed to buy a new editing computer recently, and I had the money for that, and it was great. But I just, you know, I keep the YouTube money is completely separate from my personal money. So it's just like, I have this whole separate thing over here where if we need money for the show to buy anything, you know, I don't have to go out to my audience and be like, hey, does anybody have this magazine that they can let me borrow or whatever? I can just get it. So for that reason, I wouldn't want to do YouTube full time. Sorry, this is a long answer, but the other reason is just like, you know, I have, you know, what I would consider to be a career. Like, you know, if you make a distinction between a job and a career, one is not better than the other. Like, I'm not a better person because I have a career instead of a job. But I'm saying, like, if I was just working, like, you know, I don't know, if I was just working retail or I was just working somewhere as like an administrative assistant or something, you know, walking away from something like that is like, well, that's no big deal.
Right.
But, you know, like maybe I'd rather do YouTube than do one of those things. You know, but for me, you know, I went to college and got a degree in chemistry so that I could go be a chemist. And like the job that I have now, that would have been my dream job when I was in college. If somebody had said to me, like, you know, here's what you're going to do for a living and describe my job to me, I would have been like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. And so for me to not want to do it anymore, like,
right.
You know, if I ever had to make a choice, like, I either have to quit doing YouTube or I got to somehow figure out how to not do my job, you know, as much as I love doing YouTube, the channel would have to go. So I guess if I had to wrap that up, it's like, no, I don't want to. And even if I wanted to, for financial reasons, I wouldn't.
Perfect. So one thing that always fascinates me about you, Chris, is how you can remember and so vividly express your past memories, like with your flashback videos. I know a lot of people love your flashback videos. Have you always had an excellent memory like that? How do you bring back these memories and just talk about them so freely?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, I would just say it's funny that I have so many people tell me that. Like, you know, they'll leave comments on the videos, or like, you know, people send me letters or emails or on Twitter, like, oh, how do you remember that stuff? Like, to me, I just thought, like, I just assumed everybody could. You know, some of them tell me, like, oh, I have like one or two memories from the entire time I was in elementary school. And I'm like, are you okay? Like, you been in a car accident or something? I didn't realize that was a thing. But the other thing that I'll say that people, you know, don't realize, because why would you, is like, I don't just like turn on the camera and decide like, all right, today I'm going to talk about, you know, the video games I had when I was in 5th grade. Click, turn the camera on. Like, the flashback episodes are completely unscripted, but I spend a lot of time thinking about them before I make, like, if I'm driving to work or I'm doing something mindless at work, I'm like, my whole head is like, you know, cranking away, like thinking about like, okay, what did I have at this time? And when did I get that? Or what other memory do I have of that time that would help me remember, you know, how this happened or how that happened? And there have been times where I realized by doing all of that, you know, digging away at my memories, there have been things that I thought happened when I was a kid, like I just assumed. And the more I thought about it, I realized, oh no, that's not possible. Like that item, that game, or that thing was not out yet when I thought I bought it. And so there was at least one episode of Flashback that I almost made, and it didn't make it because and the thing is, nobody watching the show would have known or cared.
Right.
But for me, it would have been weird because I would have realized that, like, oh, that's not really when I got that, or that's not, you know, I worked all summer to save up money to buy something, and I thought I was buying one thing, but then I realized that thing didn't come out for 6 more months, and I actually used that money to buy like this other thing. And just the other reason that I think I try so hard to do that is that it really upsets me when I make a flashback episode and then later I remember something else that should have gone in that flashback episode, even if it's something that's no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
So like the last flashback episode, it was the Thanksgiving episode. And I realized something after the video was uploaded that I wish I had said in the video, but I completely forgot about it. And it's not even something most people would have cared about, but it's just like, I'm kind of telling my own life story in some ways on the channel. So when there's something I don't say, it's like, oh, dang it, I forgot about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally understand what you're saying. I've done that before, too. Like, oh, darn it. Have you ever uploaded a video and realized that you made such a significant mistake you actually quickly take it offline and then edit and upload a new one?
No, but I have uploaded a video and then found a mistake that I thought was like, who cares? And then very much wished that I had done what you just said. So, as we've already said, my channel, nobody used to watch my show, really. So it wasn't like not that big of a deal. And I mean, really, if I had to say one video that made my channel kind of take off, it was the launch of the Super Nintendo. So I worked on and off for months and months. Like I started working on the Super Nintendo video on Christmas Day of whatever year, I don't remember. And that video got uploaded in July. And but I wasn't working on that video nonstop for 7 months. But I'm saying like that's how long it took before it was finally. Because I'm sure if I go back and look, I probably uploaded other things. In fact, I think the NHL '94 video came out during that time. So I was working on that video on and off for like 7 months. But like I said, I didn't really have that big of an audience yet. So, but I mean, this taught me a valuable lesson, I would say. So, one of the things I have to do on my show, like, obviously I write the show and then I record, into a microphone, not this microphone, but, similar microphone, whatever. I read the script, I record voiceover, right? And then the voiceover goes into the editing program and then you edit your show based on the voiceover. It's just like animation. Like if you go watch a cartoon or animated movie, the voiceover is what happened first because then the animators animate the artwork based on the voice. And it's the same thing. Like I have to put in all the information, all the visual assets are all based on the voiceover. So I get that in there, I start putting in all the stuff. But then sometimes what I'll find is like, oh, I don't like the way I said that. Or there was like a plosive. For people who don't know, that's like if a burst of my breath goes right onto the sensor and you get this horrible thing that sounds terrible. And so what I'll do is I make notes on some paper, okay, at such and such a time in the timeline, I need to re-record that. And that's one of the last things often that I'll do. Because I'm going to record it, it's going to take the same amount of time to say the same sentence or whatever. And you might have to make some little minor adjustments, but whatever. And it was towards the beginning of the video. I don't really remember exactly what it was, but I was talking about some early Super Nintendo games. And one of the games that I showed was ActRaiser. And that the whole sentence had to get re-recorded because I don't remember why, it doesn't matter. And so I thought, okay, no big deal, so I'm going to go re-record the sentence. But for whatever reason, around that time, just for fun, I'd been playing a lot of Axelay on the Super Nintendo. And somehow the word Axelay got jammed in my head. And when I went and re-recorded that sentence, instead of saying ActRaiser, I said Axelay. The script says ActRaiser, but I said Axelay, and I never noticed it. I upload the video, and immediately, one of the first comments comes from this guy I know a little bit, Joshua Turbo. And he said, "Oh, at like 2 minutes, he's like, that's not Axelay, that's Actraiser." And I was kind of upset. I was just like, "Oh man!" Like, but I was like at work, and I was like, "Well, whatever, no big deal. Like, nobody watches my show anyway." And I mean, I don't know how many views that video has now, but I mean, it's millions or whatever it is. And so, still to this day, in fact, I think I got one yesterday of somebody saying like, "Hey, whatever time, it's not actually that's act." Because the thing is, if you make a mistake like that, if I'm just somebody watching some show that I don't know anything about, and I see a mistake like that, especially early in the video, I'm like, well, what else did this guy get wrong? Like, is this like BuzzFeed or something, where someone that doesn't even know what they're talking about just made a video to get some clicks? And at that time, YouTube allowed you to put annotations on your videos. So, like, I said Axelay, but a little thing popped up on the screen that just said, like, "Oh, whoops, that's Actraiser, not Actraiser," or whatever.
Yeah.
And then YouTube got rid of that feature. So now there's no way for you to go through and correct something like that. And I suppose if I really wanted to, I could probably go into like an online video editor and like just crop out that 2 seconds where I say Axelay and show Actraiser. But that's kind of a problem with YouTube because there's other platforms like Amazon. I don't upload my videos to Amazon. I've tried, but it's kind of a pain. But one thing I'll say about Amazon is that you can upload a new video file. Like if you upload a video and then later you're like, "Oh, there's something wrong with it," like you can upload a new file that just replaces the old file, but like the information is all the same. So like if I could upload a new file to YouTube and just replace that one, but keep everything else, it's still the same link, it's still the same everything, then that would be great. But I mean, it doesn't take much imagination to understand why YouTube doesn't allow that. But, so to answer your question, like, so I did not delete the video and re-upload it, but I really wish that I had.
Yeah, the commentators, whatever you call them, they always will remind you of every single little mistake.
Yeah, but I mean, they're not being rude. It's not like people saying like, "Hey, dummy," like they're just saying like, "Hey, dude," like just so you know.
Right.
And I put a correction in the description.
Right.
But the problem is like you can look. I mean, I'm sure you know this. Like you can go into your dashboard and you can kind of see where people are watching your videos. Like this percentage of people are watching it on desktop. This many people are watching it on a game console. This many people are watching it on like a tablet. And if you watch a YouTube video on the desktop, the description is right there.
Right.
And so like I can put even right at the top line, like correction, that is not Axelay or whatever. Like, and that happened to me actually in a recent episode where I was talking about PC Engine stuff. And I said that I made a comment. I said that the core graphics doesn't have stereo audio output, and that was wrong. And nobody even corrected me. I realized that it was wrong, I think, and I put a line right at the top of the description: correction, the core graphics does output stereo sound. But if you're watching a video on your phone or on a tablet or on a game console or like on a Roku or a smart TV, the description is not really being shown to you prominently, and so you're not going to necessarily see that stuff. So, so you get a lot of the same comments over and over again of someone saying, "Oh, you said this wrong" or whatever. It's just like, I used to respond to them just to say, "Yeah, I know, it's no big deal." I don't even bother responding anymore. Not because they bother me, but just because, like,
right.
It's not going to change because other people are not going to see that comment and go, "Oh, okay, somebody else already told them, so I'm not going to also tell them."
Right.
So it's not, it doesn't bother me. It's just the nature of YouTube, I think.
Yeah. Yep. So you called it Classic Gaming Quarterly. Yeah. Did you ever have plans to have either a teammate or a partner or somebody helping you with the channel, or was that not the case?
No, that was never the case. Just because, I didn't really know anybody that would want to help me with that. But this isn't directly answering the question that you're asking, but I'm going to kind of take the opportunity to say this though. So I have a friend who lives here in Sacramento named Anthony, And Anthony, for a while, had a podcast. I mean, I've known Anthony since way before either one of us were doing anything. I met him on some forums back when the forums were more popular. But I want to kind of give him credit because, like, if it wasn't for Anthony, the launch videos wouldn't be a thing. So, this was back when, like, yes, I had a YouTube channel, but nobody was watching it because I hadn't made even a single launch video yet. And he hadn't done anything as far as content creation goes yet, but he was somebody who was really into listening to podcasts because he has the kind of job where it's kind of mindless work. And so you can sit there and listen to a podcast while you're doing it. And we were going to do a podcast together. And our idea was to do a podcast where each episode was going to cover the launch of a different video game console. And like our working title for the podcast was going to be called "Let's Do Launch," which I don't know if that would have ended up being the real name or whatever. But and then the first episode was going to be the launch of the Sega Genesis, and like we did all the research and like we had taken all these notes, and we even actually recorded the podcast. But then Anthony was going to edit it and stuff. Like he was going to take care of all of that. And he started editing it. He said, like, oh, the audio sounds really bad. We need to, like, redo it. And we never got around to redoing it. And so I just basically told him, I said, hey, I'm going to use that, all the research we did. I'm going to make a episode of my show. And he was like, oh, yeah, I don't care. Go ahead. But so I almost had a partner in him, although it wouldn't have been. Like, I think one of the sticking points was that, like, I wanted to tie the podcast into Classic Gaming Quarterly. Because I felt like I already had this established thing I was doing. And much like the YouTube channel was like the channel of the website, I wanted to make the podcast of the website. And like he didn't want to do that because I think it was like, it frustrated me, but at the same time, I understand where he was coming from because that was kind of like my thing and we were starting like our thing. And why does it have to be tied into my thing, I guess? But, so we never did it, but then he ended up subsequently starting a podcast talking about, old video games and going through his whole gaming history. And he had me on a bunch of episodes, which it's funny because I love his podcast is one of my favorite podcasts to listen to, even though he doesn't do it anymore. But there were a bunch of episodes where I was like co-hosting the show with him. I don't like those episodes. I think it was better when it was just him. But he ended up quitting. And he got really into like virtual reality gaming, and so now he has like a YouTube channel just talking about virtual reality video games. But he quit doing his podcast, and I missed listening to his show so much that's why I started making flashback episodes.
Oh,
because it was very similar to what he was doing. Like he was going through and talking about like the first episode was like the first video game console that he ever bought. As an adult, I guess, but he's a few years older than me. So, like he was 18 in 1989. So, like, he bought a TurboGrafx, like, as an adult. But I loved the format of his show. And when he quit doing it, I was so bummed out. I tried to talk him out of it. And, he was just done. And so I think the whole reason I started the flashback episodes was it kind of scratched that itch a little bit. Even though it's not interesting, like I don't go back and rewatch my episodes of Flashback because I already know that was my life. I don't need to hear me talk about it. But I think for me, like the experience of me making those shows kind of replaces the fact that I can't listen to his, I still listen to the podcast all the time. Like I'll just wait like a year and then I'll go listen to the entire run of shows again. Although sometimes I skip the ones that I was in, but yeah. But so that was the closest I ever got, really. Like, it would be nice to have a partner. Like, I wouldn't mind. I'm always trying to tell Corey, my life in gaming. I'm like, hey, if this thing doesn't ever work out, we can do, like, my life in Classic Gaming Quarterly or something. Because, we've worked together on a couple of episodes, and I really enjoyed it, But when I watch, like, what Corey and Try do, or, back when GameSack was a regular two-man operation, like, I would get kind of like envious. Like, I wish I had someone that I could do this kind of stuff with, just because I think it would be a little bit more fun.
Yeah, I guess there could be good and bad in both scenarios because in some ways it might be a little frustrating if the other person isn't quite as ambitious as you are, for wanting to get things out, or vice versa. If you feel like you're getting pressured by the other person, you can't
Yeah, for
lose
sure.
the
I
freedom.
mean, to have a creative partnership like that works, like, you have to have good chemistry with the person. I think you have to have like similar goals. Like, if one person is trying to do the show like as their career or means of making money, and for the other person it's like a little side thing,
Mm-hmm.
then that's probably like a mismatch. But I also wonder sometimes if I was working with somebody else, if it wouldn't help keep me motivated to like get videos out faster. Because like this year, I mean, I put out quite a few videos on CGQ Plus this year, but this has not been a good year, I would say, for the main channel. And, sometimes I think, maybe if I had somebody else I was working with and I was able to sort of just commiserate with, maybe it would be better. Like, part of what helped me out, honestly, was I made some comment on Twitter about how just sort of like all of, the world events this year have just really had sort of a negative impact on me mentally and have made me less motivated to work on the show. The number of other creators that either said something to me publicly or more of them reached out to me privately to tell me that they were having the exact same problem, it really made me feel better because I felt like, okay, I'm not the one that's just being like a little, too sensitive or letting all this stuff get to me. Like, it's a struggle for everybody. And, other content creators are managing to fight through it and get their content out. And so I need to just, put my big boy pants on and do the same. And so that's what I've tried to do.
With all the work you put into CGQ, do you play any games outside of CGQ?
I mean, not very often, I would say. Like, sometimes I'll go through a phase. I mean, like, I have a PS4, but the only reason I bought it was to play like driving games, like F1 games or like Project Cars. But like, I have the wheel and everything for it, so I have to like set it up here on the desk and stuff. So it's like, if I set it up, I'm going to really play it for a while, like a week or something, and then okay, I got to put it away and get back to work. But or sometimes, like, I got some new games for my PC Engine that I'm kind of trying to work on. Like, I'm trying to. I want to start getting into like 1cc like shooters, but I haven't done one yet, so I don't want to try to overstate things. But so like when I'm doing that, I'm not really doing it for the show. Although I think if I get to the point where I can 1cc a game, I'm probably going to try to do it, like capture it and do it like streaming style. I wouldn't live stream it, so I mean that would be cool. But so technically, I'm not playing those games for the show. So they're kind of being done just for leisure. But I mean, for the most part, I don't play games like just for fun, which maybe that sounds like it's sad or something, but really it's not. It's just that, if I'm going to be doing like a magazine read through, right? Like, I get the magazine out, I read through the entire magazine off camera, and I make a list of all the games I have to record the gameplay footage for, and then I go play all those games. And like, obviously that's fun. Like, I get to sit down, because I mean, it takes me days to record. Because again, like I said, I'm only working a few hours, at night. It's not like it takes me like several 8-hour days. I'm just saying it takes over the course of a week or something of doing it for a couple hours a night. Like, I come down here and start recording video game footage, and so like I have fun doing that. Or the scripted episode that I'm working on right now. Having to record all this gameplay footage. But even beyond that, like with these types of videos, like I have to write out, like I have to talk about the game a lot more than I would in a magazine read through. So I have to play those games a lot more. And especially, I try not to be critical of games on my scripted shows anymore. Like, I think I kind of dabbled in that for a while, but I don't see what I do with those shows as like doing a bunch of reviews as much as it is like a showcase. Like, I'm just, here's this game, here's this game, here's this game. And if a game is good, then I'm going to talk about it more. Like, it's going to get more screen time than a game that I think is either not good or is not interesting to the viewer. And so what that means is that if it's a good game, I'm probably going to play it way more so that I can get deeper into the game and get a bigger variety of gameplay footage and have more things to write about it. And so, if I'm sitting down and playing, maybe a few hours a night for several nights, the same game, that's a good game. And of course I'm having fun doing that. But, like I have a Switch and I have a PS4. I always have the intention of playing those more. Like I still buy the occasional game for each of those consoles, but I don't generally actually get around to playing them.
Yeah, there's just never enough time. This might be a hard one to answer, but what's the oldest memory you have in regards to some kind of game?
So I can't say for sure. Like I've got a few gaming memories from like early childhood, but I can't really put them in order and say like, no, this happened before that. But like my earliest memories, which I've probably touched on a little bit on Flashback, but I remember playing like Pac-Man, like the arcade cabinet of Pac-Man. Going to arcades maybe with my parents or something, or stopping by and getting to pump a couple of quarters into an arcade cabinet. But my first sort of meaty game memory is it was either first or second grade. My then best friend, like my best friend in elementary school, he had an Atari 5200. Because this would have been, before the NES. Like I was in first grade in like '83. So, I don't know when the 5200 came out, but I thought it was like 81 or 82, but it doesn't really matter. But so he had an Atari 5200, and I just remember, sitting on the floor with him in front of his big wooden console TV, and we played a lot of like, I believe he had Spy Hunter. I know he had Cubert. I think he had Vanguard. He definitely had Space Invaders. And I remember us playing those games together, and that was sitting in front of the same TV that a few years later we were sitting there playing the NES instead. But that's my first big memory, really. Certainly, that's my first memory of playing home video games. But I'm sure that at some point before that, I had played like Pac-Man or Pole Position, like on an arcade cabinet.
Right. Yeah, we had in our area, I'm from Illinois, and Kmart, I don't know, you probably know this. Kmart had this, basically they created a pizza parlor, kind of like Showbiz. It was called Abracadabra.
Huh.
And it only existed for like 2 years, literally. It was like 2 years. And I remember my parents taking me to it, and I didn't know what year it was because I was so young. So I had to, as an adult, I looked it up and did some research on this. And like I said, it was only there for like 2 years, and then it went bankrupt, and they got rid of it. But it was the biggest arcade center that I had ever seen. I went in there, and I remember, I think it was 1982 or 3, so I was either in kindergarten or first grade, thank you. I just remember walking in there, and there were like at least 50 arcade machines. It was just this massive room. And kind of like Showbiz Pizza, how they had. Do you remember Showbiz?
You mean like Chuck E. Cheese?
Yeah, it used to be called Showbiz Pizza around here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I used to go to Chuck E. Cheese when I was a kid, sure. Well, I don't remember what they were called, but around here we definitely had at least one chain of arcades that was owned by one of the big movie theater chains. But I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember what it was called. But in the early '80s, arcades were huge, and it's funny because some people want to argue, like if I make a comment in one of my videos about the video game crash, and people want to argue like, oh, there was never a crash. And it's like, maybe crash is not the right word to use, but there was definitely a market depression. And that was when like all the arcades went away, and the things like the Atari 2600 and its games were all found in the clearance bin. I think some people, when you say video game crash, they wrongly think that you're trying to suggest that there was this period of time in America when video games like completely ceased to exist, which is not the case. It was just that in the late 70s and early 80s, arcade games became this huge, like, pop culture, I don't know what the word is, but it was just like, it wasn't just like hardcore gamers. It was just like, just everybody. It's like, oh, it's Friday night, let's go to the arcade,
Yeah.
And then when Space Invaders came out on the Atari 2600, everybody was buying Atari 2600. I mean, the Atari 2600 by then had been out for like 3 years, but it wasn't that popular. It was that, arcades got more popular, Space Invaders got popular, and then all of a sudden, people that wouldn't normally be buying video games were buying the Atari 2600. And when we talk about the video game crash, all that really means is that home gaming returned to a state where it was only being enjoyed or practiced by the more hardcore people that were really into video games or into computer games. And then what happened when the Nintendo came out, the NES, is that then it went back to once again being this mass consumer thing. But unfortunately, like you're saying, those arcades that, unfortunately, you and I are a little bit too young to have a lot of well-formed memories of them. Those arcades mostly went bankrupt.
Yeah. I noticed you had called it the Nintendo, and then you said NES. Was it called the Nintendo when it first came out? Did you and your friends all just say Nintendo?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Say, oh, we're going to go play Nintendo. And it was funny, I don't know if you remember, but Nintendo actually came out with sort of this, it's not really a marketing campaign, I don't know what you would call it, but they were trying to get people to stop calling video games Nintendo. Because so many people were using it as a catch-all phrase.
Yeah.
Video games.
Yeah.
That they were worried they were going to lose the trademark of Nintendo because it was going to become a common use term for other things. But for me, because of my age, and because I was old enough during the heyday of the NES that that was the only Nintendo thing there was. There was not even a Game Boy yet, and so if you just said, "Oh, I have a Nintendo," that meant the NES. And so still to this day, like I still just call the NES the Nintendo. Like to me, there's Nintendo, then Super Nintendo, then Nintendo 64. I try not to do it on my show because I don't want to cause confusion. But yeah, for me, the NES is the Nintendo, and it always will be.
Yeah, same here. Okay, do you have any funny or interesting gaming-related experiences you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I can't really think of too many things except for like things I've already shared on the show. But like,
okay.
Like I mentioned, Golden Axe is one of my favorite Genesis games, and I mean, I have the arcade. It's funny, I have the arcade board of Golden Axe, but to be honest, I prefer the Genesis version just because, like, I only probably ever got to play Golden Axe in the arcades a couple of times back in the day, but we played Golden Axe on the Genesis all the time. But I used to play it 2-player, with my then best friend Stuart, different guy than the Atari 5200 guy. And, I don't know how we got started doing that, but in that little, in between each level, you're sleeping around a campfire and you have all your potions just out on the ground. And those little gnomes or whatever come out and they steal all your potions. And you have to go hit them to get your potions back. And then after you get your last potion back and the gnome runs off the screen, you have like this 3-4 second delay before it ends. And so Stuart and I, like, if you stop touching the controls, your character kind of like spreads their legs out like it's sort of like this battle stance. And I mean, this is very puerile, but it's kind of the point of the story, is we would go run our characters over to the campfire and stand right over it because then they would spread their legs a little bit. And then we would sit there making like sound effects. And I don't know why it's very stupid, but the thing is to this day, I still have to do that. I don't make the sound anymore. But to me, anytime I play Golden Axe, and I always play as Gilly as Thunderhead, anytime I play it, as soon as I grab that last potion, it's like I have to go hit the campfire in time for him to spread his legs out. It's just like a habit, and I think it's almost like I feel like if I don't do that, maybe I won't have a good game or something.
Oh, that's great.
Another one I can think of actually with Stuart again. I don't know if I'm pretty sure I mentioned this one too, but I don't know. We just got together and we were just like, I guess, we were like 14, 13, 14, 15. I think we were hanging out before I moved away. So, I mean, we were that age when, fart jokes and whatnot or dirty humor was really funny because you're kind of first discovering like dirty humor
Right.
when you're that age. Well, at least back then. Now I don't know, but we used to play this computer game called Scorched Earth, and I don't know, some people maybe are familiar and some aren't. Scorched Earth, I guess, is kind of similar to Worms. It's probably like maybe Worms was based on Scorched. I don't really know, but you have all these little tanks. It's a single screen. You have some tanks. Like one tank is you, and the other tanks are the enemy, and you set the angle that you're going to shoot at, and then the power, and then it goes ahead and it shoots. And then if you missed, then okay, next time I need to dial back the power, or I need to change my angle a little bit. And then like in between the levels, like you make money based on like how many other people you killed. You can buy like better weapons. There were all kinds of crazy weapons like missiles and MIRVs, and it was pretty cool. But one of the things that it would do is anytime right before you would shoot, like I think you would click both mouse buttons at the same time to shoot. And when you would shoot, above your tank, a little like it would like say something, like you'd click it and it would be like, say hello to my little friend, and then it would shoot. And then if you got shot, or not you, but if any of the tanks got shot, they would say, something like, I'll be back or whatever. And somehow we figured out, like we were looking at the files in the directory for Scorch, and we figured out that two of the files, like they were really just text files. They just had different extensions, but you could open them in a text editor. And each one was literally like one file was a list of what they were going to say when they shot, and the other file is what they were going to say when they got shot. And so we went, we renamed those files like .bak or something. So we weren't deleting them, but it wasn't going to use them. And then we made new files and it was all just filth, and I still have those because I still have all my computer files from when I was a kid. But it's funny watching that now because some of it's a little bit cringy because it was like 15-year-old humor, but at the same time it's pretty funny.
Yeah, yeah. Is that the only type of editing you did on games when you were a kid, or did you start to get hardcore and open up hex editors and modifying and cheating game files and things like that?
No, I've never really gotten into doing that. Like when I was that age, like Stuart, he was a lot more adept at he was learning how to, he was learning computer programming. He's the one I talked about. His dad worked for Sierra Online as a game programmer, and so like his dad was teaching him how to do like programming and whatnot. So that would be the kind of thing he would have been more able to do. I would be hard pressed to try to find a memory of one. I know at one point I used a hex editor to do something, but I don't think it was anything particularly noteworthy. But that's probably the only example I can think of when we did something like that, like editing a game, because that's beyond my abilities.
Gotcha. Do you have a general timeline on all the gaming platforms you've had over the years? Like, I first had Atari 2600.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's easy. All right. So the first console I ever got was the Nintendo. We'll call it Nintendo. That was supposed to be my Christmas present in 1987. But, I told that whole story already, but it was like, and I even kind of made reference to it in that Thanksgiving episode. At some point, it was just like, I think my dad was starting to talk to me about like, oh, maybe you want like a video game system or something. And I came like this close to getting an Atari 2600 Junior, because at that time you could get those for like 40, 50 bucks, something like that. And we were already at the mall, and I think we ended up in KB Toys, and they had a whole mountain of, these 2600 Juniors, and it came with like a couple of games free in the box. And I really thought because my dad was asking the guy all these questions, and I'm like, oh man, I think I'm actually going to get this. And then he's like, all right, thanks. And then we like walked out, and I was like crushed. I thought I was going to get, because I didn't have we didn't have a computer at home, no video. Like I could not play video games in any capacity at home. It was only if you went to like an arcade or something, which we didn't do that often. And so I was excited, like, oh, I thought I was going to get a video game system, and then I didn't, and I was very disappointed. But it ended up working out much better because I'm sure if I had gotten that, I would not have gotten a Nintendo. But I ended up seeing a Nintendo. Like I'm not sure that I even had ever seen one before. Like maybe I saw a commercial on TV, or maybe I saw a display of one at Toys R Us, but it wasn't hooked up to a TV. But I remember that, my cousins took me over to this kid's house, and he had an NES, and he had Super Mario Brothers running on it. And I remember thinking, like, that looks pretty sweet. And so I ended up telling my dad about it. And I remember at one point, he took me to Toys R Us just so that we could kind of go check it out and ask the sales associate. And like, I knew this time, like he told me, he's like, we're just going to go down there to just check stuff out. Like, we're not buying anything. So like, I knew. So then it was not like I walked out of there with anything and I was like sad because it's like, he told me. So like, okay, no problem. Like, we're just going to go check it out because we hadn't decided, like, what are we going to get? Because, the Master System was also out, by that time. And so we went down there and kind of checked it out and saw how much it was and asked the guy some questions about it. And so my recollection is that I kind of left that situation thinking like, okay, that's what I'm getting for Christmas this year. But this would have been in like September or October, somewhere around there in 87. And so it was just like, and I think I said this in my video, but when you're a kid, like I would have been 10 years old. If it's like September or October, you're not really, time goes so much more slowly when you're a kid. Mm-hmm. So like from even October, the 2 months between October and Christmas is a long time. And so like I wasn't even going to start like thinking about what I was getting for Christmas other than like, okay, I guess I'm going to get a Nintendo for Christmas. So that's cool. And then one day, not long after, my dad, I would come home from school, of course, at like 3:00. And, my parents wouldn't be home yet necessarily. Like sometimes my stepmom might be home, but, I would come home and my dad, like, you probably think of normally, like my dad would come home from work at, I don't know, 5:30 or however long it took him to drive home. And it wasn't that uncommon where like if he had maybe stopped at the grocery store first or something like that, he would come in and tell me like, hey, there's some stuff out in the trunk that, you need to go bring in. Right. And so when he came home and said that, he said, hey, there's a box in the trunk I need you to go grab. I didn't really think anything of it. I was like, oh, okay. And I go out into the garage or whatever, and I pop the trunk open, and there's this gigantic bag that says Toys R Us on it. And I look in there, and it was an NES, the control deck set. So you got the NES 2 controllers and Super Mario Brothers. And then also in the bag was The Legend of Zelda, because I had told him, like, that's what I wanted for Christmas. I said I would like, an NES and The Legend of Zelda, because at that time they were running commercials on TV for The Legend of Zelda. And I just thought it's funny. I thought the game looked neat, but I was my perception of what the game was completely wrong. Because like I had come out of playing like arcade games and single screen games. And based on what I saw on these commercials, I thought it was going to be something like that. And obviously it ended up being something, much more awesome. But, so that was how I got my NES. And so that's console number 1. Console number 2, if you want to call it a console, in 1989, the Game Boy came out. And I remember I'd heard about it at school. Like kids were saying like, oh yeah, Nintendo's coming out with like this handheld, gaming thing. And, you can put in different cartridges, and I was like, you remember when we were kids, right? Like there'd be all kinds of crazy stuff going around the playground, like things that were just patently untrue.
Yeah.
So like some kid was telling me like, oh yeah, there's going to be this handheld or whatever, like Nintendo, and you still put the cartridges in. And I was like, yeah, okay. I don't think that's true.
Right.
But then sure enough, I was at Toys R Us one time and they had it on display. And it was like the same thing. Like you couldn't play it, I don't think. It was just behind glass. It was like, here's a Nintendo and a few games, or the Game Boy rather, and a few games. And I just remember thinking like, I want that badly. And, so I told my dad, for Christmas, I want a Game Boy, and I remember him kind of telling me no,
Mm.
Like, I don't know if he told me no right then, but, because I kind of kept on him about it. Because he would keep bringing it up, like, well, what do you want for Christmas? I'm like, no, I want a Game Boy.
Right.
And he's like, you just, because again, it seems like time used to kind of move more slowly back then.
Mm-hmm.
This was 2 years after I got my NES, but his whole thing was like, we just got you that NES.
Right.
Because somehow I feel like back then, like 2 years is not really that long. Like now, it's just like, oh, that thing's old. 2 years. It's from 2 years ago,
Yeah.
And like, he was basically telling me like, I don't think we're going to be able to get you, that the Game Boy this year. So, you should think of something else that you want. But, I don't really know because, it's certainly possible that maybe they didn't have a lot of money at the time. But my dad used to also like to play kind of like mind games like that. Like I think he would just think it was funny to like try to tell, oh, you're not going to get that, and then you end up getting it, because then you're like more surprised. Like not because he was being mean, but just that way, like, oh, I'm going to make him think he's not going to get it, and then I'm going to give it to him, and then he's going to be, like over the moon about it.
Right.
Because like he basically led me to believe that I wasn't getting it. And then, on Christmas morning, I opened, I got the Game Boy. I said this on my show, but I did peek. I wish I hadn't. This is like the one time probably that I actually peeked. Because I think it was that same year, or maybe the year before, like my best friend was showing me, he's like, hey, I found where my parents were hiding their Christmas presents. So like he already knew everything that he got for Christmas, and he showed me. And so I think that's how I got the idea of like, oh, I'm going to go in there and just like really carefully lift up the tape and open it just enough that I can look in there and see what it is. Because I don't think I really knew like what the dimensions of the Game Boy box even looked like. So like, I didn't really know if that's what it was, And when you're a kid, you're all like stressed out about it. Like, am I going to get that or not? And it's like, it's funny because now as an adult, it's like, who cares?
Right.
When you're a kid, it's like, it seems so important.
Right.
But, so I ended up getting, as I said, I opened it. It was the Game Boy with Tetris. And then because I got that, I got my mom I think my mom bought me a game or two for it. And my grandma, I think, may have also, because I ended up with like 3 or 4 games around Christmas season that year. So, so that was my second console. And then before I got my third console, I got a computer. For me, it's like, growing up, a computer was really primarily for gaming on. I mean, obviously, I ended up using it for schoolwork and whatnot, but that's not really why any of us as kids like, oh, I can't wait to get a computer so that I can type my research paper instead of writing it out by hand. Like, who cares?
Right.
Like, so I wanted it for playing games on. But that was in 1990 that I got my first computer. It was like an IBM. It was an IBM PC clone that by 1990 was already a little bit outdated. Because we got it used, and it was something like, I asked my mom, although I asked her after I made that episode about it, and she said she remembered it being like $300 maybe, or $350. And I mean, that was for the computer and the monitor and the printer, but it was like a monochrome monitor. In 1990, I mean, everybody was using color monitors, But I mean, I didn't care. I didn't know that much about computers, so it's like I didn't get it home and think like, "Oh, this computer sucks." I was like, "This is awesome! I have a computer."
Right.
And I just slowly upgraded it over time. That became kind of like what I would spend my money on. Like, I would go. I wouldn't save up my allowance. I wasn't good at that for some reason. Like I always felt like my allowance was kind of like my spending money.
Yeah.
But then I would go do things like, around the neighborhood, like mow lawns and rake leaves, or sometimes my mom would let me come to work with her if she needed help. And it's funny though, because she would have me, I would go to her job with her and work all day, but then she would just pay me out of her pocket, which doesn't really seem fair for her. But whatever. And so that money I would save up and buy, like, I ended up getting like a color monitor and a hard drive sound card. At some point, before I got the sound card, I upgraded the entire computer and got most of a new one, I guess. Just at a computer store, so I could just buy the parts that I needed. But the part of the reason I bring that up is that became my primary gaming platform, really for the next several years. Like, from 1990 until like probably like 94 or something. Like I was really a PC gamer. But in 1992. So I was still friends with Stuart during that time, and Stuart, that's the whole reason actually we became friends. Is that like I got a computer, and the next day this was in eighth grade. I was at school, and it was in PE class, and I mentioned to this other kid, Isaiah, that I was friends with. I said, "Oh, hey, I just got a computer," and Stuart overheard me saying that. And again, this was a time when like most people did not have computers. Like most other kids at school didn't have a computer at home of any kind.
Mm-hmm.
And so if another kid had a computer, you instantly had a point of commonality with the person. And it's like, oh, hey, I have one too. Like maybe we're going to be friends or whatever. And that's what ended up happening is that Stuart became like my best friend for the next couple of years until I moved away. But and even after that, I mean, he moved away, but we still talk on the phone all the time. I got to go visit him a couple of times. He was still in California, just no longer in my city anymore. But even though we both had computers that we were primarily gaming on, for some reason, Stuart decided that he wanted a Sega Genesis. Because I think probably we didn't go to the same high school, but I think the kids at his high school, somebody must have had one and convinced him it was cool. And so Stuart started saving up his money to get a Sega Genesis. And I didn't know anybody that had one. So all I knew of the Sega Genesis was playing the demo kiosk at Toys R Us, which I think I played Altered Beast, and I think maybe later I played Golden Axe on the demo kiosk. Maybe, I mean, for sure Altered Beast. Maybe another game that I don't remember clearly, but Stuart used to come over to my house and spend the night a lot, like either on Friday night or Saturday night, because we would stay up all night, not all night, we would stay up late into the night playing video games, and or walking to the corner store and buying some soda and candy, coming back playing more video games, and we used to mostly do it at my house instead of at his house, because a lot of times my mom wouldn't be home. And it would just be my grandma, and my grandma was like a night owl. Like my grandma would go to bed at like 2 o'clock in the morning, and then wake up at like 10 or something. And so like we weren't keeping her up. Like we could be out in the living room watching TV or playing video games, making a moderate amount of noise without being annoying. And my grandma didn't care because she was up anyway. So, but so one of these times after he got his Genesis, like right after he got his Genesis, he spent the night at my house, and so he brought it over. And that was like the first time I ever saw Sonic the Hedgehog. When he got his Genesis was right after, maybe not right after, but after they started packing in Sonic the Hedgehog. So it was still a Model 1 Genesis that said high definition graphics around the dome, but it had Sonic instead of Altered Beast. And even as a couple of kids that were playing, some pretty awesome computer games, like Sonic the Hedgehog, like blew our minds. Just because, you know what I'm talking about, because you're really into playing old DOS games. It's just like, now you can play computer games. It's like, oh, well, this is like the same game that's on the Xbox, but it just has like better graphics. But like back then, it was like completely different kinds of games. Like, yeah, you would get sometimes like ports of computer games that would come over to like the Genesis or whatever, but oftentimes they wouldn't really be as good. But then the reverse was more so. Like anytime they would take a console game, like Mega Man or something, and try to release it on the computer, it was terrible.
Yeah,
because like the two platforms just had very different strengths. And so yeah, we were playing a lot of really cool computer games, but Sonic the Hedgehog was not going to run on the computers that we were using at the time. And so it was like, to us, it felt like very next gen, like really awesome. And so I ended up getting a Genesis for my birthday that year. So that would have been, that would have been the spring of 1992. And I really liked the Genesis. I ended up, having a handful of games for it. More often than buying games, I would rent them. Because, we didn't, it always feels weird saying that when I'm trying to explain this kind of stuff, because it's like, I always kind of try to make the point on my show that when I grew up, we didn't have a lot of money.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like, well, wait a minute. You had an NES, you had a Game Boy, you had a computer. And it's like, yeah, there were times when I was able to get, especially when my father was still with us, when I was able to get, if it hadn't been for my dad, I wouldn't have had an NES or a Game Boy. But, like my mom was a single mom. And so like, there was no way she was going to be able to get most of that stuff for us. I only got a computer because my mom something happened where my mom came into a little bit of extra money, and she was able to help pay for the computer. Actually, my grandma put in a lot of the money because I think my grandma subscribed to Time Magazine. Like, she was really into Time Magazine. She used to always watch 60 Minutes, and she saw or read something talking about how computers were like the future, and it was important for kids to have access to computers. And so she wanted to help my mom buy me a computer. So that's how I had that. And as far as the Genesis goes, I don't really know how that happened. But my point is like, some kids when I was growing up, it's like, oh, well, I got 3 A's on my report card, so my parents bought me a new NES game or something like that. Like I couldn't have that. We didn't have the kind of money to throw around for stuff like that. So for me, like, the computer was perfect because we weren't buying the games. Like, games were getting passed around at school. Like, I don't, every game I had was I did copy that floppy. So, when I got the Genesis, that was great, but it's like I couldn't go to the store, spend $50 every time a cool new game came out. So it was like, for me, like, my Genesis games were more like, we went to the video store to rent some movies for the weekend, and there was a previously played game for sale in like a bin that I was able to get really cheap. And I was really lucky. I got a couple of really good games for the Genesis that way, where I didn't have to spend a bunch of money. But that was part of the reason that for me, the Genesis still took the backseat to the computers. Aside from buying the occasional used game or renting something at the store, I was still getting all of the new PC games right when they came out. And then, I don't know if you want me to go like all the way up into current modern games, but at least for me, like, the PlayStation is retro or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into that whole thing. People constantly want to try to define what is and isn't retro. And
right.
It's a completely subjective thing, but
I
consider, I guess for me, I'm saying the PlayStation is for me a console from my youth, which is relatively speaking. I got a PlayStation when I was 20, but for me at least, being 20, you're still pretty much a kid. But but the PlayStation was the first console that I bought myself. And what's funny though is, like, you talk about my memory or whatever, and I for whatever reason I cannot remember why I bought a PlayStation. Like, all I remember is, like, I went through a period of a few years where I really wasn't playing video games anymore, because my PC, like, it was a 386. So, once things like Quake started coming out, I couldn't afford a 3D card, and I couldn't really afford even to upgrade. I would have needed to buy like a 486.
Right.
Or, once the Pentiums came out, like, I knew a couple of rich kids at school who, they even had like a Neo Geo. They were like brothers. Like, they even had a Neo Geo at home.
Wow.
And as soon as Pentium PCs came out, I think they had two. They each got one. They had one that was a P60 and one that was a P90. But I would go over to their house, and like, I could play Doom with it like full screen. At home I could play Doom, but I had to have the viewable window down really small for it to not be choppy. But anything, so that kind of tells you the capabilities that my computer had. So once anything came out after that, like, I was kind of like out, because it just wouldn't run for me. I never had a CD-ROM drive either for that computer, so I couldn't really. Once my friends had CD drives, they were swapping CDs, and I couldn't take them because I couldn't use them. So, like, I remember the first big game because this was back when, like, most people were not really into video games, like other kids at school. So, like, there was like this little cadre of us that all hung out together in high school, where we were all like gamers, and really like computer gamers. And so that's where I would get a lot of my games. Like, oh, okay, well, this game Syndicate just came out. Like, here's the discs for it or whatever that are already cracked, so that I could just copy them onto my hard drive and then give them back their discs. And the first game I remember not being able to play was Wing Commander, because they had it on CD. I'm not sure if Wing Commander came out on floppy and on CD or not, but they had the CD version, and I didn't have a CD drive, so that was like the first time I was like, okay, I'm not going to play Wing Commander, I guess.
Yeah.
But as time went on, obviously it got to the point where I couldn't play anything on my PC. So, like, I would still play the stuff that I had been playing for years, like Wolfenstein or Doom 2 or X-Wing or Day of the Tentacle or whatever, but I couldn't play any new stuff anymore. And I'd probably rent the occasional Genesis game, but mostly it was like I kind of just drifted away from gaming. I was like, I turned 18 and I was like,
Right.
hanging out with friends that weren't into games a little bit more. But then what happened is I was watching a Kevin Smith movie. It wasn't Clerks, but it was either it wasn't Mallrats. It was Chasing Amy. It was the third movie, Chasing Amy. I saw it in the movie theater with my friend, and in that movie, Jason Lee's character is playing, like, they had a Model 2 Sega Genesis, and he was playing one of the NHL games on it. I just remember thinking, like, that looks like a really fun game. I want to check that out. And by this time I had a job. I was working like full time, so like I had some spending money, and so like I went down to KB Toys and I bought NHL '97 for the Genesis, and that was like the first video game I had bought in like forever. And it was certainly the first time I ever bought a brand new video game with my own money. And I went home and I was playing that, and I had a friend, the guy I was palling around with at the time, who well, he's still my friend. It's funny, like, Stuart and Jonathan, I don't really talk to anymore just because we drifted apart. But the guy I was hanging around with when I was 20 is a guy named Fabian. And Fabian and I we don't live in the same city, but we're still good friends. But anyway, we would play NHL '97 together. Like, he also had a Genesis. I think he had Mario and U Hockey for his Genesis. But, we would play NHL '97 together. And for some reason, it was right around that time that I wanted to buy a PlayStation, but I don't remember if I saw a commercial on TV. I don't know how I was really not aware of the PlayStation, because I remember when the PlayStation launched, because that's when I was working at Radio Shack, and my coworkers were all like, oh yeah, we're on launch day. We're like, okay, we're going after work. We're going to go pick up our PlayStations. And I didn't get one just because, when the PlayStation launched, it was $300. And, when you bought a PlayStation at launch, it was $300 for the PlayStation. Then you had to buy a memory card separately. That was another $20. It did not come with an RF cable in the box that I remember. I believe it only came with composite, video cables, if I remember correctly. So that would have been more money that you have to spend. And then, of course, it didn't come with a pack-in game. So you had to buy it. It came with a demo disc, but you needed to buy a game. So, you're talking about, like, after tax and everything, at least $400. Yeah. And this was a time when minimum wage was like either $4 or $4.25 an hour. And so $400 is like, even if you're working full time, that's at, that's over 2 weeks of your time. Yeah. So I just couldn't, to me, it was just like, I can't afford that. Like, I was still living at home with my mom, but, at that point, I think I was helping her pay bills a little bit. Like, part of my paycheck was going to help her. And so I just, for me, it was like, there's no way I'm spending $400 on a video game console. So I didn't get it. But by '97, when I got it, the price had dropped. I want to say it was either $179 or $149. Wow. For the PlayStation. And I still have that PlayStation. It still has the price tag on the box. I just have to go look at it. But I bought that. And then shortly afterwards, so I got the PlayStation, and of course did not come with a pack-in game. I bought a game with it at the same time called it was called Tenka, but that's not the full name of the game. It's like Operation Tenka. That's not right either. I forgot, but it doesn't matter. It was just a first-person shooter. It was published by Psygnosis. I don't know if they made it or not. But it was just because I felt like, okay, I'm buying this console, I need to buy a game. But I didn't know. That's why I'm saying I don't know why I bought a PlayStation. It's because it wasn't like, with the Genesis, it was like, I want Sonic. Like, I wasn't even worried about what other games are there for the Genesis. I literally wanted to buy a Genesis so that I could play the game that came in the box. But with the PlayStation, I don't know why I wanted it, because I was there. I got it at Sears Funtronics, by the way. Yeah. And so I'm sitting there, okay, I'll take a PlayStation or whatever, and I bought a video card. And I'm looking, like, at this particular place, they had like the glass counter, and all of the games were like under the the counter on shelves.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sitting there, and Fabian's with me, and I'm just like looking at all the games, trying to figure out what to get. It's really based on the cover art. Or you can ask the person, like, hey, can I check that out? And you flip it over. But like, I didn't know anything about any of the games in the case.
Yeah.
So I just ended up like flipping it over, and it was like a first-person shooter. And like, again, for me, like, I wasn't able to play games like Quake.
Right.
But, I enjoyed Wolfenstein 3D, and I enjoyed Doom. So, like, okay, I'll take this Tenka game or whatever. Codename Tenka. That's what it is. Codename Tenka. And I remember getting that home, and, I remember that Fabian and I were, like, kind of very impressed by the graphics. Like, it had lens flares, which I'd never seen in a video game before. And I didn't even know the term. It wasn't like, hey, there's some lens flares. Right. You kind of knew because you'd see that in, like, movies. And you're like, oh, check that out.
Yeah.
That's cool. But ultimately, I was never really that into that game. And I was much more enamored with the demo disc that came with the PlayStation. Like, Fabian and I used to play the crap out of that demo disc. Like, I remember it had Rallycross on it. We used to play a bunch of that. But then I ended up deciding, like, oh, I saw at Sears, I think, on a subsequent visit, oh, they have NHL 97 for the PlayStation. Like, I should get that. And so and so this must have happened in a pretty tight window. I actually went and I got my copy of NHL 97 for the Genesis and took it back to KB, because back then you could do that. I don't know if now, I think if you buy a brand new video game at GameStop, it's yours. But I remember that KB had a policy back then, and I think other like places like Electronic Boutique did as well, that as long as the game still looked brand new, aside from the shrink wrap, within like 30 days you could return it. Like, okay, I didn't like this game, and you could return it. And so that's what I did, and it was like no questions asked. I was like, here's my receipt, here's the game, everything's still in perfect condition. And they were like, okay, no problem. Here's your, because I think I probably paid $50 for it. And I just walked right down the mall to Sears and bought NHL 97 for the PlayStation, which is funny because if you play that game now, like, NHL 97 is really bad, like, compared to the subsequent installments, but I loved it. Like, I never played that game back then and thought, like, oh man, like, this game's rough. I had a great time with it, and I'll still play it now. Like, I played that, I spent so many hours playing that game up until NHL 98 came out. I have so much nostalgia for NHL 97 that I still enjoy playing it now. But, and so with the PlayStation, like I said, I had a job. I was able to buy games when they came out. Like, the experience that I wish I could have had, like with the Genesis, I did have with the PlayStation. Like, I ended up subscribing to PSM, and I would read that every month, and, oh, okay, cool, look, this game's coming out, I'm going to get that. And when it did, I could go buy it. Like when Final Fantasy VII came out, I bought it right when it came out. Hot Shots Golf right when it came out. I think the first Gran Turismo. But I mean, tons of examples of that. Like, I was able, any game I wanted, because it didn't happen that often, but maybe like once a month or something, I could go buy a new video game. So, I mean, for that reason, like, it always pains me when people say that they don't like the original PlayStation, or, oh, it didn't age well, or whatever, because, like, I have such a strong feeling for that console, because that was my first time really getting to, experience like the full experience of console ownership, as like an adult.
Right.
And then the PlayStation 2, because I was it's kind of funny, like, obviously I was a little bit of a Sega fanboy, because, everything people say about the 16-bit console wars, I mean, it really was true. I mean, we used to hang out at school, and it was like, I had a Genesis, I had another friend that had a Genesis, and a couple of friends that both had Super Nintendos, and we would argue, and it was always like, oh, well, this one's got better sound. It's like, oh, we got blast processing. Like those conversations really happen.
Right.
But at no point did I ever even consider buying a Sega Saturn. Especially because by the time I got my PlayStation, like I said, it was 97. And like, I would go down to Software Etc. to look at games, and there was a little area, like it was a display, had the Sega Saturn logo, and they even had a demo kiosk and had some games for sale over there. And I remember going in there with Fabian, and he was like, oh yeah, that's the Sega Saturn. Like, that thing's not doing well or whatever. Like, nobody's buying that thing. And so like, I never even thought about like, hey, maybe I should pick up a Saturn. Like, I probably missed an awesome opportunity to buy a Saturn and some games when it all went on clearance, but I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so then, like, because of that, when the Dreamcast came out, I didn't care because I was like by that time, I was however much of a Genesis fanboy I was like a super PlayStation fanboy. Like, I love that console and I still do. And so when the Dreamcast came out, I didn't want to know nothing about the Dreamcast. And I remember the first time I saw a Dreamcast, somebody had brought it over to like a house party I was at, and they had Tony Hawk's Pro Skater for it. And I remember looking at it, and you know, I mean, it's the same game as the PlayStation version, but the graphics sure look a lot better.
Yeah.
It's the Dreamcast instead of the PlayStation.
Right.
I remember looking at that, and then it kind of just like upset me. Because I knew, you know, I'm like, oh, that looks better.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm a PlayStation guy, so like I'm not going to get that. So like I didn't get a Dreamcast until the price had dropped by quite a bit. In fact, I got a Dreamcast after I got my PS2 because I got my PS2 on launch day. I actually waited in line.
Oh wow!
Outside of Best Buy, and bought a PS2 just because, like, you know, me and a different friend of mine, we were just all hyped up with the PS2. Like, we were reading, you know, like PSM had their whole like launch issue, like with previews of all the games, and like, you know, I already knew, like, okay, I'm going to buy the system, I'm going to get a memory card. I knew which game I was going to buy, and so we just like couldn't wait. And it's funny because I got my PS2, and the game that I got with it was SSX, which is like a snowboarding game that EA put out. And that game was awesome. Like, I loved playing SSX. In fact, I used to play a 2-player like split screen with a friend of mine. Mm-hmm. But other than that, like, I mostly used my PS2 to play DVDs because I didn't have a DVD player before that. And there was a place right near my house that rented DVDs. So like I would go down there and, like, you know, rent. And plus by then, like, I was with, well, now she's my wife, but she was my girlfriend. And so, like, we would go to the video store together and rent, you know, DVDs, or, oh, Gladiator just came out, you know, and you get to watch that in DVD instead of VHS. Looked like really cool. But, you know, there were really no good games that came out for the PS2 for a good little while. And then when they started coming out, it was like a trickle. So I remember I was mostly using my PS2 to watch DVDs and to play Final Fantasy IX, which had come out. But of course, that's a PS1 game, so like I didn't need a PS2 for that. But kind of the same thing happened to me with the PS2 that happened with the Genesis. Not long after I got a PS2, I got a computer that could play. Like, it was just a Dell, but it was beefy enough that I could play like any game that was coming out around that time. I could play it with like all the settings set to like maximum. And so I kind of once again became a PC gamer. And the PS2, like, I had the money to buy games though, so I was still buying PS2 games. Like, it wasn't like it was being totally ignored. Like, I was buying, you know, like Gran Turismo 4 came out, or like I remember when Baldur's Gate came out, or Final Fantasy X. I mean, I had a decent library of PS2 games, and I would rent them. But really, I was mostly playing computer games. And let's see, the next one I got an Xbox 360. And this is probably the last one I'll talk about. This is the last one I think is actually kind of a cool story. And after that, it's kind of who cares. But I don't know how many people out there that watch this might remember this, but I think this was the second Christmas that the Xbox 360 was out. Because it probably, I'm guessing that the Xbox 360 probably came out in the fall, whatever year it came out. And then, you know, so it was out in time for that Christmas season. But this was the next Christmas season. So the system had been out for, you know, at least a year. And if you remember back then, you could buy a 360. There was it was called like an arcade system or something. And it didn't come with a hard drive. And it was cheaper, obviously. And there was the system that came. There might have even been more than one hard drive system you could get. Like, you can get like a 20 gigabyte or an 80 gigabyte, kind of like the PS3. But so with the Xbox 360, you could buy it. I remember it came in a green box instead of a white box. And it was the arcade system, which is kind of ironic because their whole point was that, like, oh, it's really just for playing like downloadable games so that you're not having to install disc games to the hard. I don't know if that was their mode of thinking, but then it didn't come with any storage. But Amazon was running this Black Friday deal. No, it wasn't even Black Friday. It was on Thanksgiving, where they were going to have a limited number of these Xbox 360 arcade systems that were going to be $99.
Mm.
which was, I want to say that was probably half price. Like, I think the arcade system might have been 200, maybe a version with a hard drive was like 300 or something. But they were only going to have like 1,000 of them or something. So I just figured, well, that would be kind of cool because I think I knew some guy at work that had an Xbox 360, and I was like, man, that would be kind of neat. I never had an original Xbox. I got one later, you know. And I figured, well, I'll see if I can grab one of those, and if I can't, it's kind of like no big deal because it was at like 10 o'clock in the morning, again on Thanksgiving, and we were going to have to drive home, to go to my parents for Thanksgiving, and so it was like, well, I'll do that before I leave. And I had this whole thing where I was going to go to work because at work we have like much faster internet, and that'll help. But then I ended up, it was taking us too long to get ready, and I wasn't going to make it. So I'm like, well, whatever. Like, I wasn't really that big. I was like, if I get one, great. If not, I don't really care.
Right.
And it ended up like, okay, I'm not going to be able to make it to work before 10 a.m., so I'm going to have to just do it from home with my slower internet. And I just logged on, Amazon or whatever, and I was able to just seamlessly added it to my cart and checked out.
Nice.
And so I was like, okay, well, now I guess I have an Xbox 360. So I just remember what I did is like I got that one. And then I went out and I bought a regular Xbox 360 that came with a hard drive. And then I sold the one that I bought on Amazon. So like, I sold it for like something around retail price. I didn't like flip it. It was just, well, I guess in some sense I flipped it. Like the Xbox 360 was not scarce. So I'm saying I got it and then I sold it for the normal price. And so that way I was basically able to get, the full Xbox 360. Nice. For like $100 off.
Wow.
And like I remember I ended up subscribing to GameFly, which I think GameFly is still around, but and so I was renting games through the mail for it. I got to play like games right when they came out. Like I got Gears of War right when it came out, but instead of buying them, I was just renting them on GameFly. So, but I think that's probably the last that I can think of, like that or the Game Boy Advance would be like the last time that I owned a current console that I was like really into. Because I got a Game Boy Advance, I guess, around like 2001. Like it had already been out. I think I got it about a year after it came out. But that was like the last console that I would say I really stayed on top of, like buying games for it when they came out. I think I talked about. I did a video like over my whole Game Boy library, and I kind of talked about that. But that was the kind of thing where I would keep an eye on the sales ads, or keep an eye for when new games came out, and I would try to like grab them when they came out. And I played the crap. I really enjoyed my Game Boy Advance. Like when the SP came out, I traded in my original GBA and got the SP, and I enjoyed that. But I think that, my experience with the PS2 kind of like soured my desire to be like an early adopter.
Yeah.
Because the same thing actually, I bought a PSP not on launch day, but like launch week. Like I kind of decided like I'm going to wait and not get a PSP. But then like some other dudes on the forums that I was regularly visiting, they got PSPs and made them seem pretty cool. And I was like, well, I'll go to Target and see if they have any. But, the PSP didn't sell out like the PS2 did. So I was able to go buy a PSP. But a big factor in me buying it was that they were already advertising that there was going to be a Gran Turismo game for the PSP. And so like I got my PSP and I bought that Luminous game with it, if you're familiar with that one. It's like it's not that similar to Tetris, but it's the same thing. It's like falling pieces that you arrange. If you've never played Luminous, you should check it out. There was also a version of it came out later on the PS2, but really good game. I really enjoyed that game, and there were a few other PSP games that I had fun with, like Hot Shots Golf, because my neighbor also got it, so we used to play head-to-head over Wi-Fi. But, the main reason I bought it, honestly, was for the Gran Turismo game. And it took literally years for that game to come out. And by the time it came out, like I remember playing it and thinking, I don't even think this game is that good. So I think my experience with the PS2 and the PSP really kind of made it to where, like, I don't do early adopter anymore.
Right.
At all. Like I have a PS4, but by the time I bought my PS4, it was like a few years old. I had a PS3. Maybe I still have my PS3. Yeah, I still have it. Same thing. It was a few years old. I have no interest in getting a PS5. Like maybe later I will, but I'm saying at this point, there's no reason for me to get one.
Right.
Or the Switch. I think I only ended up buying a Switch because Amazon was running some kind of crazy, not super crazy, but I think it came with a free game or something. And I do enjoy the Switch, but I mostly just play old stuff.
Yeah.
Like I would get made like way more excited about like if I was going to go. Because what is a PS5? Like $500 or something like that? $400, $500?
I don't even know. I don't even keep track anymore.
So to me, I would just think like, well, okay, $400 or $500 for a video game console. I could get a PS5, or I already have one, but if I didn't, you could get like a RGB modded and region modded like Turbo Duo.
Right.
Price.
Right.
And I would get like if I had a Turbo Duo, if I didn't already have one and I had a Turbo Duo coming in the mail, I would be way more excited about that coming than a PS5. And that's not a judgment on the PS5 or people that enjoy that. It's just that's kind of where my head is at.
Right.
With games, I get a lot more excited about buying old stuff.
Yeah.
I talk a lot. That's why I have a YouTube channel.
That's
Nobody else wants to hear this kind of stuff.
Yeah, they do.
Every once in a while, I get together with somebody like yourself, where I make a YouTube video and I actually get to talk about this kind of stuff because nobody I know wants to hear that.
Right, right. Is your wife? Does she ever play games with you or anything?
A little bit, not too much. Like I got the arcade cab here. She likes. Like I have a Neo Geo board I can put in there, and she can play like Magical Drop 3 or something like that, like puzzle game. Like she thinks those are a lot of fun.
Cool.
She also likes Mario games quite a bit. Like when I got the Switch, I forgot. I think I forgot what game came with the Switch. But either it came with Mario Odyssey, although I don't think it did. I think it came with something else. But I bought Mario Odyssey right away, and she played. I think she played that one I think she got like 100%. Because she got all like, no, I have to get 100%. And then she was playing. I got a couple of other Mario games for the Switch, and she enjoyed those. But for her, it's more like every once in a while she'll find a game that she wants to play, and she'll get all into it. But then she'll sort of drift away from it and go, do, because she, of course, has her own set of hobbies that she's into. So,
right.
For her, playing a game would be more of like a deviation. But yeah, I think if I said, hey, let's play whatever together, like she would definitely be down for it, or just 2 days ago on Friday, I got, for the PS4, I got the Wipeout Omega Collection. But I only bought it because I needed to record some gameplay footage of it for the show. Sometimes I'll do that. Like if I need to record some gameplay footage for the show, I'll go ahead and buy the game. If it's a game where I feel like, okay, I think at some point I might want to play that game, Like I also bought Ace Combat 7 because I needed to record some gameplay footage. I thought like, well, I used to like those Ace Combat games back on PlayStation 2. So like, because the game's like $20, right? So I'll go ahead and buy that, and maybe I'll play it later. Like if it's a game where I feel like I need some gameplay footage on PS3 or PS4 game, but I don't think I want to own the game. Yeah. Usually what I'll do is I'll download the trailer off of YouTube, and then I'll just put like a credit, a video credit, and I'll just say it's the trailer because I don't want to pay for the game. But, but anyway, my point was just like my PS4 is hooked up to our living room TV, and so I was playing a little bit, of Wipeout or Wipeout Omega Collection. And, my wife was sitting next to me. She's kind of interested, checking it out. Like, I might want to try this, or that looks pretty hard, So, she's definitely not a hardcore gamer, but she's not someone who's like, completely disinterested.
That's cool. So she doesn't call you nerd all the time then?
No, she generally doesn't make fun of me in any capacity.
Nice. Cool.
I was a gamer when I met her, so I think if it had been a turnoff, then it probably just wouldn't have worked out,
Oh, that's great. So how important is it to you to have physical copies of something versus just emulating it?
Okay, well, I'm gonna answer your question with a question, I guess. But why am I playing the game in your scenario? Like, is it a game that I want personally? Because then I want to have. If it's a game like there's games that I have, and a lot of times I'll discover these games because I covered them on my show. Like, that was actually a really good game. Then I want to go buy a copy of the game. So like, and these days, I mean, I have a decent sized video game collection. So like, I'm at a point now where I think I'm buying more expensive games because I buy games far less often. Like it's not very, like I made a PC Engine pickups video recently. And like I was kind of saying in that video, it's kind of a big deal because I don't really buy games very often anymore. And so like I don't mind, I bought Soldier Blade and that game was something around $200 or $190. And like, yeah, that's a lot of money to spend on a video game, but like, when's the last time I bought a video game? Like, I'm not buying modern games. Those are 50, 60, $70 a pop. I'm not buying any of those. So, but Soldier Blade is a game that I've long been a big fan of. And I was just not buying it because it was so expensive. And I finally, I like this game so much, I really want to have a copy of it.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, it's more like, I'm really into the idea of having this sounds a little bit pompous or something, but like a curated library of video games. Like I don't want quantity, I want quality. And so if it's just a game where like, oh, that game's okay, or I just need the game for the show, then I'm fine with like just loading up a ROM on my Mister or using EverDrive or whatever. But so for me, it's like I want every game I own, I want to own for a reason.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons I like doing those collection videos is I can pull each game off the shelf and I can tell you a little story about that. Here's why I own this game. Because you have a lot of guys out there who they're more like completionists.
Right.
Like, if I don't own a game, I want it because I don't own it. And I used to be that way. But at this point, I used to be that way before like EverDrives and stuff. Where like, if you were maybe reading an old magazine thinking, oh, that game looks kind of neat, I want to check that out. You didn't have a way of playing that game on real hardware.
Right.
Unless you had a copy of the game. Like you could load it up in an emulator, but I was never into emulators that much. Just because, back in the day, like you could have an emulator and it might run very well, but I couldn't use the actual controller. Like before USB converters were like a thing. These days, I think like, if you're somebody who's not yet into retro gaming, but you're thinking about getting into retro gaming, dude, just stick to ROMs and emulators.
Right.
It's not worth the price anymore. But it used to be that playing on actual hardware, like before FPGAs and whatnot, the FPGA consoles like from Analog or the Mister, I was really insistent on real hardware. Like I would never not use real hardware if I was recording gameplay footage for my show. But now for me, it's like, you tell me the difference between an FPGA implementation of real hardware and the actual real hardware, like no one's going to know the difference.
Right.
But, so I've been actually starting to get rid of some of my games where it's like, well, why do I have that game? If I don't have a good reason, it's like, well, couldn't I sell those games and then buy the other games that I still really want that are a little bit too expensive?
Right.
But that being said, I totally respect the people that have kind of made the decision that, now with all the modern conveniences you have at your disposal, if you want them, as far as retro games go, I'm going to sell off my collection and just stick with that. Like when I hear people talking like that, I get a little bit envious just because like I kind of wish I could do that, but I just mentally I'm not there yet. I still want to hang on to my games.
Okay, so this one's really hard, but I like to ask it just because everybody's got a different perspective, and I really want to know yours.
Okay.
So what do you think it takes to make a good game?
Wow. Yeah, that is kind of a hard question. I've never really thought about that in detail, I guess, but I guess I'll say that I'll talk about it, maybe one or two things that I think are flaws in games that I think kill a game, and then things that I think make a game a good game.
Okay.
Games that make a bad first impression are a huge pet peeve of mine. Or when somebody says like, oh no, it's a good game, you just got to kind of give it a chance. Like just play it for like 4 or 5 hours and it grows on you. Like that's not a good game. Like a good game it's like a movie, like or a TV show. Like it needs to grab your attention right from the start by being compelling. Whether it's a newer game, maybe it's something about the storyline or just something about the gameplay. It's one of the reasons that I really hate that modern games start off with these like mandatory tutorial modes. Because how are you grabbing the gamer's attention and making them want to play the game if it's like, okay, you got to sit through this like dorky tutorial mode? Like I hate that. You're not. That's one of the things I appreciate about old games. Is there's none of that. press the power button, you hit start, go, and you get right into it. And maybe for me, I never really thought about it until right now, but I wonder if that's one of the reasons I'm not into modern games. Is I just let's get to it. Show me what you got. Fairness, I think, and again, I'm looking at it more from the perspective of older games. Most new games, in my opinion, don't have a whole lot of challenge to them, especially if you play single player. Maybe I think if you play multiplayer, it's different. If you play like one of these first person shooters where it's like everybody against everybody, there's consequence to poor play. But with a single player experience now, it's like, you can go play like Call of Duty or whatever and play the single player campaign mode. And like, is there a game over screen? Is that a thing? Like, I don't think there right. is. It's like you go, okay, start over again. Oh, you died, start over again. So there's not really like the motivation to be good. Like to me, growing up, like the whole point of games is that like you play it and you're not good at it, and you learn how the game works and you get better. And whether it's a game that you can complete, that if it has an ending, to be able to get to that point, or to be able to set some kind of high score, even if it's just your own benchmark that you've set, you get that feeling of accomplishment out of doing that. And you don't have that in a lot of modern games anymore. So I think they more stress the experience. Well, you're going to play the single player campaign and you see the story go along and you see the new levels. And it's like, well, that's nice, but I don't finish that and think like, man, I really did something, but you get your hands on like some, 16-bit shooter or something like Soldier Blade, you'll maybe struggle. I mean, Soldier Blade is not a good example because it's kind of beginner friendly, but you get one of those games and you start playing it and you struggle with it. Man, this is pretty difficult. And at some point you like turn this corner where you're like, man, I'm starting to get a little bit good at this game. Like, I think I might be able to like 1cc this game if I keep at it, if I keep practicing. And then finally, if you're able to do that, you're like, you really feel like, just within the confines of your hobby, like I really did something. Yeah, that was pretty cool. But to get back to what I was saying about fairness, a lot of those games, they seem like they're unfair. Like whether it's bad design as far as like cheap deaths, the game puts you in like untenable positions, or a game has bad controls. That's like an instant turnoff, right? Yeah. The game has bad controls. I'm like, you're going to have a hard time changing my opinion. Like you've got bad controls. Because you can look at a game, the one I always bring up is R-Type. Because R-Type is a very difficult game. But I mean, as I've said on my show multiple times, specifically about R-Type, I die a lot playing that game. But every time I died, I realized you learn something. Okay, yeah. What did I do there? Oh, okay. I had the wrong weapon right there. I was in the wrong spot. You got to be up here instead of down there. And so even though the game is like punishingly hard, you want to keep playing it because every time you're like, oh, okay, you can't do that. Yeah. Let me try again. But when you feel like you don't know what you did wrong and you die, it's like, well, why do I want to keep playing that? Like that's no good. Right. It's one of the reasons, and I've talked about this before. I'm actually working on a video about golf games. I'm not particularly into golf. I don't watch golf on TV. I don't play golf. I don't own a set of golf clubs. I love golf video games because they're so simple and yet so not. And I love the aspect of the game where it's like you have your strategic choices that you make. Like, okay, well, there's a 7 mile per hour wind and it's blowing this way. Okay, I'm going to have to aim my shot over here. The game says to use a 7-iron, but I don't think I want to do that. I'm going to use an 8-iron. I'm going to use some backspin. I'm going to do whatever, right? And you have that strategic aspect of it. But then you have sort of more of the Twitch gameplay aspect. Okay, now I got to use the 3-click swing system and like not screw it up. And then if you did screw it up, you learn something. That wind was too strong. I needed to aim even farther this way. And then there's also the aspect of, I didn't time my clicks exactly right. And something about that for me makes a golf game very addictive, even though like I don't care about the game of golf particularly. I
Uh-huh.
just think in some ways, like a video golf game is like a perfect video game.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. That's really good. Now I'm gonna have to go back and start checking out more golf games.
You should. Well, like I said, I'm coming out with I'm doing a video that's going to be every. No one's going to watch this video. Well, you'll watch it.
I'll watch it.
I'll say this won't be a popular video. It's going to be on CGQ Plus, but I'm going to look at every golf game released for the TurboGrafx and PC Engine.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah.
Cool. On a scale from 1 to 10, how much do you think nostalgia improves the experience while you're playing a game?
Oh, I mean, somewhere between like an 8 and a 10. I mean, nostalgia is like, I think part of being a retro gamer or whatever, it's my age, like so much of that is nostalgia fuel. But like I love it. Like it's funny because some people, you might say like, oh well, I really enjoy playing whatever game, and maybe it's a game that is generally not considered to be good,
Right.
And so you'll say, oh well, I really enjoy playing Akari Warriors on the NES or something like that.
Right.
And someone tries to dismiss that by saying, well, that's just nostalgia talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like that is making me enjoy the game more. It's like taking me back, to being a kid. So for me, nostalgia is very important and plays a huge part. And one of the things though that I think is also cool talking about nostalgia, and it's funny, this is an argument that I got into with Anthony, my friend, because he tries to put rules like you cannot be nostalgic about anything if it didn't happen at least 7 years ago. And I'm like, what? Like, what is that? That's not how that works. Because, like, for me, and this might sound weird, or maybe just, whatever, but I get nostalgic for things that aren't necessarily from when I was a kid or when I was a teenager. Like, I get nostalgic about videos I've made for my channel, for instance. Like, before I made the launch of the Genesis, like, I hadn't really played most of those games, the launch games. But now I like playing them because it's like I really enjoyed making that video a few years ago. And it's like, it kind of takes me back into that time getting to play those games again. So, I mean, for me, I would love it if, some psychology PhD student or something should do their thesis on, like, if they haven't already, on, like, what fuels nostalgia and, like, what receptors in your brain is, like, nostalgia, like, tickling or whatever. Because, like, for me personally, like, I've had people on my show on CGQ Plus try to tell me, like, probably not fans of the show necessarily, but say, like, you're really way too stuck in the past, and it's not that I'm stuck in the past. I very much enjoy the present, but I just, for whatever reason, I'm very much fueled by nostalgia. And I mean, I could go into why I think that's true, but we probably don't really have time for that. But a lot of the reason of why I do what I do, like with my show, especially like the flashback episodes, like when I'm thinking about that and getting ready to make it, I'm mentally going back to that time. Like I had a wonderful time making the Thanksgiving episode this year because, as I said in the video, like many of us did not get to have a normal Thanksgiving this year, myself included. But, I mentally went back to the, Thanksgivings of the late 80s.
Right.
And so for me, I mean, that was kind of helpful to, help me still feel like it was Thanksgiving in some way.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I love your flashback videos so much is you'll be talking about something, even if it's a game or something I've never even played or heard of. You'll say something at various points in your video that completely brings me back. It's really strange how it works, but it's like, oh, when you said that, it just reminded me of this. So somehow in our brains, all that stuff's kind of related. You just don't even realize it. It's all subconscious.
Those flashback videos are very interesting in that I didn't really expect those to develop like their own audience or for them to have an effect on people. Like, I mean, I'm not trying to say like those, in the grand scheme of things, like that channel and those videos are not very popular, right? I mean, like, they all have thousands of views, but not more than that. But it's not, I never started that channel because I was trying to build an audience.
Right.
It was more about a place for me to be creative or do what I wanted to do. And it still surprises me now that a channel that small with a viewership that small has had the effect that it's had on people. Like that, those flashback episodes have a stronger following than like my launch episodes.
Yeah.
Because it's like that. It's like those videos actually sort of touched some people,
right,
who have said like kind of just variations on what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and I think it kind of goes to show that, you know, what I said, you know, a couple hours ago now about the importance of things like subscriber numbers and whatnot, and how it's not really that important. Because to me, I could just have CGQ Plus. Like that's it. Like take away, like maybe I broke some rule on YouTube and they take away Classic Gaming Quarterly, and all I have is CGQ Plus. I would be very, very happy.
Yeah.
Right. Just making those videos, like making little variety videos about this or that.
Yeah.
And always seeing the same group of guys and some girls posting down in the comments section. Like to me, that is like when you start a YouTube channel, that's what you hope you can have. You hope you can have a little community where you can all kind of commiserate about, you know, whatever your channel's about. Like in my case, like, you know, nostalgia about the old days and stuff like that.
Well said. So do you have any favorite game developers? Like companies or people that you know of that personally develop games, whether it's, you know, independent game developers or, you know, big corporations?
Do they have to be current?
No.
Oh, okay, good. Okay. Yeah, for sure. Aside from, I feel like it's a very lazy answer to be like, oh, Nintendo and Sega. Like, well, yeah, obviously. But, you know, from like the 8 and 16-bit eras, certainly Capcom and Konami, both. You know, Mega Man from Capcom. And then like, you know, I always think when I think of Capcom, Mega Man and then later Street Fighter. And for me, Konami, Castlevania. You know, Castlevania, and then like, you know, Gradius and Life Force. But you know, if I was going to talk about favorite game developers of mine, like, you know, Sierra Online would be a huge one, just because, you know, I don't think I knew anything about Sierra until I started hanging out with Stuart. And you know, because his dad worked there, he had all the games. Like he had this big desk in the living room where he had his computer set up. And like, you know, it's one of those old desks that has those big drawers. Like the upper drawer is kind of shallow, and there's like a lower deep drawer so they can put files in there. Like he would open that and it was just a lineup of like all these boxes of like King's Quest, Space Quest, Police Quest, Fexter, the Black Cauldron. We didn't play that one because that's kind of a kiddie game, but he had it. And you know, I didn't know anything about Sierra before that, and that just turned me into the hugest Sierra fan. Awesome. And then I think it was like, you know, my love of playing like the King's Quest, Space Quest, Police Quest is what got me into like LucasArts point and click adventure games. So like my two favorites are Monkey Island 2 and Maniac Mansion 2 Day of the Tentacle. And then like on the PlayStation, Psygnosis. Like the first game I ever bought, right? Codename Tenko was a Psygnosis game. But you know, they made like Wipeout, and they made some really good F1 games actually for the PlayStation 2. But like anytime, you know, if I see any game, like, okay, I'm doing a magazine read through or whatever, oh, that's a Psygnosis game. I'm like, oh, I want to make sure I check that one, you know, just because it, like for me, the Psygnosis name kind of means something. So those are the main two I want to mention: Sierra and Psygnosis. Like I said, you know, you can talk about, you know, Microsoft or whatever, but you know, like, well, obviously, like it goes without saying that, you know, Sega, Nintendo, and even like Konami and Capcom, they make like quality games, of course.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting how some game companies have transitioned, because back in, you know, our day, Electronic Arts had some really good games. And
actually, that's another one that I should have mentioned. But yeah, you know, I was playing Electronic Arts games as probably you were before it was just EA Sports and whatnot. You know, like I mentioned that I had the couple of well, it was more than a couple, I guess, but two of the Genesis games that I bought that I just found in like a previously played, you know, stuff for sale bin at a rental store were Buck Rogers' Countdown to Doomsday and Starflight. which I didn't know anything about either game, but they were probably like $8 or $10, complete in the box. And so I was like, oh, let me check that out. And in both cases, I was very much rewarded for that decision because they were excellent games by Electronic Arts. And then I've got a decent collection of Apple II software, like original Apple II software. And I've got a bunch of Electronic Arts games, like back when they came in sort of that album style folder and whatnot. But Electronic Arts is kind of a shame in that, I would say they were so awesome and now they're kind of not.
Exactly.
You look at stuff like Sierra and Psygnosis, well, they're just gone.
Right.
But EA is still around. So they made the choice to no longer, if you go back and look at the principles by which EA was founded, they are just not doing that anymore at all. Activision too.
Yeah. All these companies are.
Look at the Atari 2600. I mean, like the best games were Activision games, and that was Activision was formed by disaffected Atari game programmers who wanted to be able to make these cool games and put their name on it, and Activision, like you just showed, it's a shame.
Yeah. What do you think about independent game developers, indies versus the big corporations nowadays? Do you follow many indie developers or games?
I really don't, but only because I don't play modern games.
Okay.
I mean, I think just thinking about it, I think that the smaller game developers, like indie game developers, are very important only because when you go back and play games from the 8 and 16-bit era, when it didn't cost so much to develop a game, you had a lot more variety and you had a lot more interesting games when developers could take risks. I'm like, okay, maybe this is going to be cool, maybe it's going to be terrible. And now major game studios, they simply can't afford to do that. Because if you spend the tens of millions of dollars or more that it costs to make, a full, whatever you want to call it, like full release modern console game, if that game tanks, that could be the end of that studio. And so they just can't afford to, that's why are we cranking out all these first person shooter sports games? Because they know that they'll sell. It's like, okay, I'm going to spend $100 million making this game. I don't have to worry about not getting my money back. And so, these indie developers are able to make, okay, well, this is going to be a smaller game. You're not going to get 100 hours of gameplay out of it, but you're also only going to spend like $20 on it or something. And it doesn't come with all those development costs. And so if you're somebody our age, I think, that enjoyed playing a lot of the off-the-wall games that were coming out back in the day, the only way you're going to be able to enjoy that now is if you check out, a lot of these indie games.
Yeah.
But, I think the challenge with that for those developers is that, if you go to like the eShop on the Switch, how do you even find a game to play? Because there's so much shovelware.
Yeah.
Like Nintendo does not do anything seemingly. I mean, they must do something, but to control what comes out on the eShop. And so if you're an independent game developer, how do you get your game to stand out in that crowd? If you're a big game developer, you have all this marketing that you can do. But, like just because I have a YouTube channel, I get a lot of these emails from, I think a lot of these independent developers, they end up sort of having these email lists of like, I hate that word, like influencers or whatever, that they just sort of, bulk send these emails out to. And, I don't cover that kind of stuff on my show, so I don't ever really, okay, you made a game, great. Like I just usually delete the email, not because like, oh, that's junk mail, but just because like, well, that's not what I'm going to do. But it's just like, you kind of see the struggle these people are going through because it's like they're having to try to hustle just to try to get their game seen, which I think is a real shame. Yeah,
that's true. If you could change one thing about the gaming industry, what would you change?
I mean, I think just to go back to what I already said, I don't see how you could change it.
Like if you could just flip a switch and change something, what would you change?
I wish there was a way for us to go back to having the kind of variety in games that we used to have. Like these days, the only places I go where I end up looking at the video games is, well, really probably the only place is Target, right? I mean, the only chain video game store that still exists that I know of is GameStop, and I don't like GameStop, so I don't go in there. But back in the day, you go to the mall and you go hit up Software Etc. or Electronics Boutique, and there was just all these games for you to look at, and it's just like now, I go into Target and they don't really have that much space devoted to games anymore.
Yeah.
And so you go look and it's just like, okay, sports game, shooter, sports game, driving game, sports game. And it's just like, I don't really buy games that much because it's like I don't see anything where I'm like, ooh, what's that?
Right.
And part of that is probably because now we're moving away from having physical copies of games, right? And so you're going to go to the store and what you're going to see on the shelf at Target is like a sliver of what's available, on that platform. But I miss the idea of going to the store I'm going to go buy a video game, but I have no idea what, and then coming home with something. And so it's hard because I think guys my age, especially that are so nostalgia fueled, we get kind of stuck in the past. And I just want to play I just want to play Sega Genesis. Just leave me alone.
Yeah.
But it's not really somehow the games were necessarily so much better. But it's I wish we could still have the excitement that existed back then, and all of the crazy variety of games we had back then. I wish we could have that now. I wish that I could get as excited about a new game console coming. I mean, the PS5. This comes from a perspective of total ignorance, but is the PS5 that much better than the PS4? Because I have a PS4 and I have a PS3.
Exactly.
I only bought a PS4 because there was a game that I wanted to play,
right.
an F1 game. It doesn't knock my socks off. Oh my god, this is so much better.
Right.
It's you really get, necessarily you get diminishing returns with subsequent generation that comes out, right? It's the graphics can only get so good.
Right.
But then, in what way is the game industry generating the excitement anymore? Right? Okay,
right.
Graphics is not where it's going to happen, right? So figure it out. In what way are you going to make it so that, you've never seen this before. You've been playing video games your whole life.
Right.
You've never seen this.
Right.
This is going to be.
Right.
For a while, people thought it was going to be virtual reality, and maybe it still will end up being that at some point, but it's not that now. But, I've been playing video games for 35 years, and I'm still sitting in front of a TV holding a controller, and nothing's really changed. So, and I guess that's why I say my answer is sort of open-ended. It's I wish something was different so that there was still that same level of excitement, when you got that new issue of EGM and you were reading about those new games. Wow.
Right.
I don't ever see something now where I say wow, that's really something cool. And the closest thing I would say, and like I said, I don't play it that much, but the Switch, being able to dock that and play the exact same game on my TV.
Yeah.
And then my wife wants to watch something, no problem. Pull it out of the dock and I'm playing it in handheld mode. That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
But even still, the games you're actually playing is it's still variations on the same theme.
Right. Yeah, the only thing that I can think of personally that would be exciting for me is I was trying to think back to when I was a kid. And, you don't really understand what game consoles and computers are capable of. Your imagination goes wild and you're like, I want to know what's behind that door. When you'd play King's Quest and you'd see something across the river, you're like, oh, I wonder what's on that other screen. And you don't understand there is no other screen. That if someone could make a game that dynamically generated the world as you traveled, forever, it's not there's a limit on memory or something.
Yeah.
But for your world, when you go through that door, it does get generated, and it's cohesive, and it's not, you can't tell it's fake, because a lot of times the dynamically generated stuff looks fake. But that would be pretty exciting if someone could figure out a way to make a game like that.
That would be cool, because I feel like when sandbox games became a thing, that seemed this is something new, being able to roam around this huge area sort of freely. But at this point, when did Grand Theft Auto 3 came out? Almost 20 years ago.
Right.
Okay, well, what? Like, I feel like what you're saying, that feels like the next evolution of like a sandbox game, in that you can make this world that's ridiculously huge because it's not being all just pre-designed or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Chris. Well, I think that's the last question. I really appreciate you doing this. This has been so much fun.
No, thank you for having me on the show.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So, subscribers, if you haven't already, get over to Chris's channel, please. Check out both of them. I'm probably on CGQ Plus more than CGQ. I mean, I think you have more videos on CGQ Plus because you put out smaller ones.
That's definitely the case. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's more like community. But the CGQ regular channel is super, super polished and amazing videos over there as well. So, thanks again, Chris. I really had fun.
Thank you for having me.